And he's exiting. Where are they?
There he is.
Oh, hello. Sorry. I've just. There it is. Was at my feet. Was at my feet. As usual, I've arrived. I've arrived in a. Ooh, ooh. I've arrived in a haphazard fashion. I actually haven't had breakfast. I thought, are we recording yet? Are we actually recording?
Yeah, we're live. This is
Okay, that's
streaming.
cool. I thought
Yeah.
maybe in
This
the.
is the raw version, right?
Oh,
There's the raw and
okay.
the cooked.
Yeah.
So yeah,
All right. Well,
we get
that's
to see you eat your breakfast. What are you having?
I haven't had breakfast, so I thought maybe as we kind of warm up before we jump in, I could
Mm-hmm.
maybe have some breakfast, and really also maybe put out there to the two bots who are currently watching us. My kind of like my weirdo credentials, right? Because I've got my Pyrex jugger porridge,
It's porridge, okay.
and and then cow semen. No, it's not actually cow semen. It's vegan cow semen. Um, right?
That makes it okay.
Yeah, vegan cow semen. Robot cow semen, essentially. And then this stuff which you're not supposed to have if you're vegan. I used to be like a vegan, but I love honey, so I can't. Do you know vegans don't eat honey?
Yeah, you can't take what belongs rightfully to the bees.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
it does make sense, but honey I've always felt was a little bit like because we do give them, okay, we swap it out for some yum sugar, don't we? That's how they do it. They take the honey, and then instead of the giving that delicious stuff to the bees, we give them our processed white piece of shit sugar. But they love that stuff. It's like
They
cocaine to
like
them.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a mutually beneficial relationship. But what would Morrissey say?
Oh, Morrissey
He
would like
wear he
only be.
wears he
Yeah.
wears leather shoes.
Oh, does he? No.
Well, yeah, there
No.
was an issue about, well, I read that, maybe it wasn't true, but there was an issue about his something about his clothing. I think it was shoes. And yeah, he was wearing leather or something. So,
I find that surprising because Morrissey is one of those few people who's really a militant vegan. I mean, it's one thing being a vegan, and most vegans, I think, are a tad hypocritical. I mean, vegans, I mean, we all cheat a little bit. I'm no longer really a vegan. I'm a sort of vegetarian, I suppose. But I've always thought Morrissey's like a militant vegan. If you're a militant vegan, you can't get away with shit like that.
yeah. Well, I'll have to research that. I just remember having read that in passing somewhere. Maybe it was on Wikipedia, so it's not
Right.
really reliable.
Yeah. How are you doing today? Where's your amazing backscape, which you usually have?
Oh, this is the same one. The
Oh,
bookshelves.
okay. It's just because we're
It's just
yeah.
different angle.
Mm, yeah. I was one of the reasons I'm late, he says, trying to find an excuse, is because I found these amazing teasels out this morning when I was walking Max. Do you have these in Taipei?
I don't. Can you bring it closer? I can't
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
see it.
I thought I would have them in the shop, but you know what? I'm actually going to take them off because they don't look as magnificent. They look like just pieces of. It looks like I've taken pieces of cow turd and stuck them on bamboo stalks, whereas in fact they are utterly magnificent. These are the brutal motherfuckers of the plant world, of course, because I thought we need something symbolic of that, seeing as that's probably a term I'm going to try and use as much as possible just in case you ever decide to try and monetize your channel. Um, yeah, so these babies, I'm sure you've seen them because they pop up in a lot of art. Um, right, so these are the heads of the teasel, the dried teasel, which were also, as you can imagine, used pre-industrial times or even possibly early industrial times for combing out wool because they've got these kind of yeah, for wool carding as it was called.
Oh yes. What? How do you spell that?
I think it's Teasel,
Teasel. Let's
or it
see.
might be Le. I thought it would be a very cool backdrop, but it doesn't look that good on screen. It's actually not as aesthetically pleasing as I thought it would be.
The Dipsacus, a
Yeah,
genus of flowering plant in the family Caprifoliaceae.
that one.
Teasel, Teasel, or Teazel, or Teazle. Take your pick.
Yeah, I really love them because you know you're walking around in the winter. There's not much color around, but they're so just architectural because they sort of they're quite high, and you just to see them against the sky is magnificent.
No, we don't have those here. Not that I've seen. But I'm not much of a nature boy.
Oh, really? Are you
Well,
like
at
a
least I
like
haven't
a
been. I
uh-huh.
haven't been recently. I'm much more urban. Well, I've never been much of a nature boy, but lately I just feel like trapped by the city.
Yeah, in what way?
I don't know. There's always something to do. There's
Oh, right.
always
Like good trapped, not bad, because I feel trapped by the city, but bad
no,
trapped.
no. I don't necessarily think it's good. It's just difficult to find time to go to the mountains or you know uh I don't know what the seaside occasionally, but it takes an effort.
Hmm. How close are you to? Because you live in Taipei, right?
Yeah.
How? I mean, in terms of where you live, if you wanted to go out into untrammeled countryside, how long would that take you?
Mm, depends on which untrammeled countryside I wanted to go to. I mean, it's like an hour's drive to a more remote place, maybe, and then there's the
Really?
northern seacoast, which is less than an hour,
Hmm.
and that's a nice day trip. There's some amazing rock formations on the northern coast of Taiwan. Uh, but yeah, as far as it well, and there's also there's a mountain here in the city, but that kind of involves a drive as well. It's all within an hour. I mean, there's really no excuse. I could do it. I just always find something else to do
Hmm.
here or at the office, and so that is just not prioritized, which
Yeah.
is probably not a good thing. I should probably, find the teasel equivalent here. I probably could if I opened my eyes to it, but that hasn't been my focus of late.
Yeah. And Harmony, is she? I'm going to call her Harmony. I don't know your wife's name, but is she actually Taiwanese?
Yes. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. She has her own place though. We're not cohabitating.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always thought. I've always actually, well, not always thought, but the older I get, the more I think that that's the way to do it. If you want to actually have a happy relationship, don't live together.
No, there's something to that. Yeah, I have quite a bit to say on that topic, but maybe we should save that for another time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm nearly through. I'm nearly through. We can start recording soon. I just need to. If I don't have any breakfast, I will.
Well, this
I
may
will
be the
walk.
most interesting part of the broadcast, you know. Breakfast, instead of discussing reading Revelations, it's
Maybe
breakfast with Steve. What time is it there?
it's just gone to half two.
Oh, okay. Breakfast at 2. Yeah. Kind of
Yeah,
an
that's when I normally have breakfast.
afternoon tea.
Sometimes 4.
But
I mean,
you've been
basically,
up.
I don't eat until I feel hungry, and I never feel hungry in the mornings. Also, because I
Are
have
you an
dinner at about 2 in the morning. So yeah.
Are you an early riser?
Not at the moment. No, my sleeping patterns have really gone to shit. But it's okay because I only start seeing clients kind of 1 or 2 o'clock. So I don't sweat it. I don't have to get up early.
Hmm.
How do you do that? Because you're also a real night owl.
Yeah, well, it's not easy. I need to practice what that sleep doctor, what's his name? Matthew Walker, the guy who wrote Why We Sleep.
Hmm.
He calls it biphasic sleep patterns. You need to have a nap midday, but I actually, most days I have a triphasic sleep pattern. Like I have my sleep, my nocturnal sleep, which usually doesn't begin until after midnight.
Yeah.
Very rarely do I sleep before midnight, and then I usually have to wake up early. Then there's 1 or 2 naps. That's the general routine.
And how long will you nap for?
Uh, could be an hour and a half or
Oh,
2.
okay. Serious nap. These aren't
Oh yeah.
Winston. These aren't Churchillian naps. 20-minute.
What were his? He just had little cat naps, 10-minute,
I don't know.
15-minute.
I don't know where that came from, but I think he was into napping, but I think they were quite short. You know,
Hmm.
he had wars to fight, things like that. You know.
Well, the guy I heard about was um who Grothendieck, the mathematician. He would sleep anytime, anywhere, um, just irregularly. Whenever he felt like it, he would just doze off, and then he'd get up and solve some mathematical problem, and then he'd fall asleep again. And then, of course, there's Klimt, who lived his life in a dressing gown.
Oh, really?
So yeah, there are famous pictures of, well, famous. They're photographs of him it's kind of like a smock, but it's just a one piece he would throw over himself, and I think he would nap, and then he'd paint, and then he'd fuck one of his mistresses and impregnate her. I mean, he had like a lot of kids
Sounds
with
like a good life.
quite a few women, but yeah, I always liked his attire. He just has like a one piece smock that he would wander around in and receive visitors, and do his thing, go about his daily life. And who else?
Hmm.
Who's the other great sleeper? I hear Balzac um, kept himself alive with coffee, so like he would sleep much of the time, and then when he needed to write something, when he needed to complete the next installment of the Human Comedy, he would brew a big pot of coffee and get his shot of caffeine. That's what I hear. But yeah, I'm
I mean, that
definitely
makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of those very, very prolific folk, did use, as we know, they did use substances. I mean, Sartre, and I guess another great example, right? I mean, he was always
oh
set
yeah.
on speed, essentially,
Yeah, basically
churning out meaning and
amphetamines.
nothingness
Yeah.
on speed. I mean, that
Yeah.
book was written on speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, speed currently, some form of it, like let's say Adderall, would be like my substance of choice. Not that I've
Mm.
done a lot of it. Actually, I only tried it once, but it was fantastic. Like when I was trying to edit uh, this book here, ladies and gentlemen, Jigs and Tales of Baudry. You see, we
Ooh,
can always include some
I haven't, I haven't,
shameless
I haven't seen that one.
self-promotion.
Is that when did you do that?
Long ago, like
Uh,
before Ernest Games, before Pilgrimizing, before even the translation of Persians. It was after the translation of Pessoa, but anyway, yeah. When I edited that, I had a little Adderall, and wow, it really helped me focus. Gave me a lot of energy as well. So
mm.
I'm not going to, say bad things about people who partake of that.
I think even coffee, right? Coffee, as we know, coffee and cigarettes um, have served writers and artists for forever, essentially, and they do. They have both of them are very, very good at kind of allowing you to kind of just focus, drill down, and just stick stick to it, stick with that sentence.
Yeah, well, I mean, I say speed is my drug of choice. Actually, it's caffeine. Tea, my
Yeah,
pomelo tea. I I really can't function without it. I mean, I can, but I something feels off when I don't have a cupper, as they say in your area, or at least
yeah, yeah. Me
the
too.
British
Yeah,
TV shows I've watched have
indeed.
used that phrase. So, are we ready to go?
Yeah, we are ready to go. I've got yeah, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Oh, well, before we go, I was actually going to ask you. So this is the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was because I'd like to run this on Idiotville as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I thought for that I would do. I say a remix, but I mean essentially pretty much everything you would have up there, but I thought I'd add in a few other little tiny little idiocies to, and maybe a little bit of music, a little bit of
Yeah, yeah.
bits and pieces. So the question is also maybe to, if that's helpful for you, I'm going to be giving it a really good edit anyway. So,
Absolutely. Just
so
send it
could
to
I,
me.
could I,
Yeah,
could I maybe just, I mean, shall I do the edit and then you've got it, kind of thing?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
the live stream will remain on the channel, and then I'll send you the raw footage, and you
brilliant.
can do whatever you want with it and send it back to me, and we can post it both places.
I think that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my final edits are not certainly not as sophisticated as yours. So any bells and whistles you want to add to it would be greatly appreciated. And maybe I'll, include my branding
Sure.
at the end or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be great. All right, so let me just do a little count in, and we'll start it. Um,
Yeah.
37 minutes in to the live stream.
Do we?
So
Is there actually anybody? Is there anybody watching?
let's see. Let's see if
Although people
there's
will, the odd person will pick it up later, of course, as well. But yeah, anyone?
uh,
Anyone on there now?
let me look on YouTube. I'm not streaming on Rumble yet, but that's coming soon. It says one watching right now, but
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. All right. So let me start it in 5, 4, 3. Hello, all you book burners, and welcome to another episode of Books Are Burning. I'm Mark Will, author, songwriter, and publisher in permanent exile, currently based on the island of Taiwan. And with me once again, this time in the role of guest as opposed to host, is Steve of the Idiotville YouTube channel. And Steve is here today to talk to me about the highlights of his reading in the previous year of 2024. So, welcome back to Books Are Burning, Steve.
Thank you very much. I have, as you can see, I've chosen as my name today, The Idiot Rides Again. I don't know if, well, you probably won't. It's a very British, but maybe you do, a very British reference here. I have fallen in love with this um, Justin Hawkins of the Darkness. Anyway, he has a YouTube channel called Justin Hawkins Rides Again, and he starts each episode with him on an acoustic guitar doing this little ditty which goes Justin Hawkins rides again, again, and
I
I've
know
now,
this guy. I've
you know
seen
him.
that. Yeah. What does he do? Like album reviews or
No, no, no. Well, he is Justin Hawkins. He had this hit in the early aughts called, I believe, in a thing called Love. Is that the full title? Anyway, it was this massive, massive hit. And some people say one hit wonder, but I mean, he's he's a phenomenon, but he's also very, very sharp, interesting, funny guy. And he has 500,000 people on YouTube, and now I suppose that's his main thing. And he just does all
mm-hmm.
sorts. He talks about music. It's very Justin Hawkins focused, because he is like a really proper old fashioned rock star, but of the sort of glam era, you know, um, you know, Bowie, what's his name, Bolan, all of those kinds of,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of channeling that kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
But I've kind of just fallen in love with that channel and with him, because he is a splendiferous personage. So this was my kind of homage. The
Is
Idiot
he
Rides Again.
American or is he a Brit?
No, he's British. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay. Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I know I've seen it. I'll have to look more closely at that. But why don't you, before we start, I don't even know the answer to this. Why don't you tell us where you got this moniker, the Idiot? And you've rebranded your channel. Your
Yeah.
YouTube channel was the Idiot's Ejing. Then for a brief period, it was We Need Some Therapy. That's All? Question
Well
mark.
remembered.
And now it's called Idiotville. So tell us
Idiotville.
about that evolution. What's going on there, and why? I mean, you're not offended if people refer to you as the idiot. Apparently, like you embrace that title. I call myself the buffoon, or the
All right.
fool, or
That's
the
the yeah,
fool.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But so what? So just tell us about that. I mean, is it a reference to Dostoevsky, or is it Dostoevsky's idiot is basically that Russian holy fool? Is that what we're talking about, or
Maybe.
I'll just let you explain?
I'm actually reading. I'm reading The Idiot. The Idiot is reading The Idiot at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I was saying to you, I need a bit of a
How
palate
meta?
cleanser. A palate cleanser from Mishima. That Mishima. I know you're a big Mishima nut. It was just so. I felt like not even more Mishima can actually rival that Mishima. So I'm reading The Idiot. I'm going to do a review of that. But so yeah, something of that. But in a way, I guess, as it does with me, because I'm also an Enneagram idiot, is that in a way it sort of maybe kind of ties back to the Enneagram. Maybe we'll come to that with Gurdjieff, because we're going to talk a little bit about him. But in the sense that the Enneagram essentially says, we're all asleep, we're all trapped in our ego cages, we're all idiots essentially, um, and I don't know, I find it good to keep that in mind, both for myself and for other people, because I can get a little bit, particularly because I'm an Enneagram 4 idiot, I can get very over, what is the word, kind of like, I was going to say over into myself, but also under into myself. I can be narcissistic neurodivergent nitwit, as I also sometimes like to say, but I can also be like a self-hating Enneagram 4. And the idiot feels like it's sort of somewhere in between there. It's like a nice it's like my default. That's sort of like neutral, right?
But are those two things not basically the same? Like excessive self over um glorification or overvaluing and the reverse, undervaluing, self glorification and self denigration. Are they not two sides of the same coin?
Yeah. Well, obviously.
Yeah,
It's
it's
because
all part of the Enneagram 4's desire to be unique and individual and different, right?
exactly. And the more you try to be unique and different and individual, the more of an idiot you are, and therefore you also then kind of look at the trail, the slime trail of your various creative effusions, of which there have been many, and you kind of go, oh, that was, when you were doing it, it's like any slime trail, right? It's like sort of in the moment of ejaculation. This is the purest essence of my being exiting from my body, and then when it's in the tissue, it's like, this is the most disgusting smelly shit on this planet, a bit like that.
Yes, sir. Yes, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Well,
But also the other thing about Idiotville, just to put in again another little thing, as we're doing, this is our both of us have a bit of this passion in us, right? Self-promotion, a go-go. I also used to do a web comic called Prozacville for a number of years, and
mhm.
um, and of all the things I've done, there's lots of things that I've done that I feel kind of like, no, not good. I mean, wrote a whole bunch of novels, they're all crap. But Prozacville was pretty good, I think. And so I think also what I'm trying to do in Idiotville and with Prozacville is a kind of Synecdoche, New York project. And I'm saying that also because you and Tomek very kindly did a whole episode on Synecdoche, New York,
Yeah.
for texting. And
Right.
and there's something about my ego cage that I can't remember the name of the guy, the main protagonist there, that is very, there's some need to turn his life into art, in a very self-involved, almost excruciating way.
Yes.
I mean, well, I haven't listened to your texting episode for ages, but what was your main takeaway in terms of what that idiot was trying to do there?
Well, I mean, it's been a while since I watched it, but I do remember I appreciated it much more than Tomek did. I enjoyed it more than he did. I
Mm,
mean, I thought it was fantastic. Like I was surprised that I hadn't um seen it before. And in fact, I have, or before I watched that, I'd watched some of Charlie Kaufman. Is that the guy's name? The
yeah, yeah,
director,
yeah.
writer, director. I'd seen some of his other stuff and liked it. So it's it's somewhat surprising that I hadn't watched that before. So I was really glad that you recommended that and I had the chance to watch it. But yeah, he's like many of us, I suppose. He's trying to make art out of his life. He's trying to document his existence. He's trying to leave a mark in some way, as Mark will sometimes tries to do by the effort of his will. He tries to leave a mark. Um, and you know, there at times one is overwhelmed by the absurdity and insanity of such an ambition or project. And I think he, the character, if we're talking about the character, who is, you know, I guess Charlie Kaufman's alter ego, he experiences the most like alienating aspect of that, or the most existentially horrific um aspect of that ambition or project. I mean, I think my description of it was the movie about something. It's like beyond meta. It's
Movie about the movie.
yes,
That's
it's
what I
like
love.
that.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
meta.
me
There's
too.
so many
Yeah.
layers of meta.
Yeah.
It's like you think this is navel gazing. Well, how about navel gazing inside your own navel, looking at your navel through the eyes of
Yeah.
your navel, right?
Right.
It's like pushing it to the max until it becomes absurd and also then wonderful. Surely, right? It's no longer
Yes.
navel
Yeah.
gazing. It's just
Well,
amazing.
wonderful and terrible, you know. It's like the I mean, Proust is one of my all-time favorite navel gazers, right?
That
So
doesn't surprise me.
what's that?
No, it doesn't surprise me that yeah, you're a Proustian. Yeah.
Yeah, I am a Proustian for sure. I mean, that came to me late in life. I discovered him. Well, I knew about him, but I never like got into In Search of Lost Time until I was in Korea, and then I just devoured the whole, you know, the whole series. And just as I have a Mishima section of my library back here, I've got a Proustian section somewhere. Maybe it's back over there, but you know, that's like a canonical text or series of texts for me. And so, you know, that's like his purpose or his ambition or aim is to self document, you know, and Charlie Kaufman and his main character in this film, it's like Proust on steroids, or Proust
Yeah.
to the 10th power or something like that. Which yeah, there's I guess it's like if Proust had been, I don't want to say postmodern, but you know, if he had this sensibility of if he had this meta kind of sensibility, you know, which I guess is characteristic of the postmodern, but if he had more of a sense of play and self parody, it would have ended up being something like that. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just what I
It
thought
does
of.
make a lot of sense from what I've read of Proust. I have yet to be kind of, let's say, fully pegged by Proust, but I do feel like I feel like I'm getting there. I feel like, you know, just like I feel like I'm not sure if I would have been ready for Mishima even, I don't know, even 5, 10 years ago. I feel like there's certain, you have to be of a certain age, you know, to truly appreciate some of those very fine wines. Otherwise they kind of like lost on you, you know. You're like, oh, yeah, I can see it's a classic, but it doesn't really go, oh, here, dying human creature, this is something important to tell you before you two, you know, um head off to Nowheresville.
Well, we should clarify for listeners and viewers that the Mishima text you just recently read is the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you raised the question of whether or not there's anything even by Mishima that can compare to that. I will say yes, there is. The Sea of Fertility tetralogy is unbelievable.
Mm.
I would, as I mentioned in text, I would, if I were you, I would work my way up to that. Like
Yeah, that's what I'm going to
maybe
do. Yeah.
maybe read one or two other novels before jumping into that. But yeah, that's one of the great reading experiences of my life. That tetralogy. Just what can you say about it? It just makes me ashamed to be a writer. You know, when I think about what he achieved in his short life, I mean, I'm already older than he was when he offed himself, right? And the productivity, the dedication to his art is just astonishing. All the while, he's also, you know, a bodybuilder obsessed
Yeah.
with the gym, and he's a martial artist obsessed with kendo and whatever else he was into.
Well,
And yet,
everything, yeah, everything he does is just so, it's that super, I would say again, primary instinct, sexual, it's that like sexual 4 or sexual 8 drive. I mean, he literally is the living embodiment. When you were talking about the bodybuilding, I suddenly had that image. As a kid, I read lots of comics, and in the back of these comics, right, you would have those, we're of a similar generation, maybe saw similar adverts. Those adverts of the guy, like the puny guy on the beach who's getting his
yes,
face full of sand, and then he goes off
yes,
and he builds himself up and he becomes the Incredible Hulk. I mean, Mishima is the literary version of that, right? Because you
that,
see those videos of him, and he's
yeah,
literally like Kafka. And then 2 minutes, well, not 2 minutes later, I mean, 2 minutes in YouTube time later, he's there like, roar, he's like Rogan or something. I mean,
yes,
fucking hell,
yes.
Mishima.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, he just did that by the sheer power of his will. I mean, he was, it's even more extreme than the puny guy on the beach who has sand kicked in his face from that ad, you know. Um he was the ultimate Japanese mama's boy, you know.
Oh,
Um
really? Oh, right. I didn't.
oh
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You've read the biography. Yeah, you've read all the
Yeah,
biographies as
I
well.
mean,
Yeah.
I guess more accurately, you could say he's the grandmama's boy because, you know, I think from birth basically until he was 5 years old, he was barricaded in the grandmother's. I can't remember if it's the maternal or paternal grandmother, but he was barricaded in her room in the basement of the familial household, and like he she forced him to sleep with her. I don't mean sexually, but like, you know, he slept next to her every night. She didn't like it when anyone tried to talk to him. Basically, he had no human contact other than his grandmother. Like he didn't even see his his parents that often. That's what I remember from the
Mm.
bio. So I mean, he grew up fucked, you know, like there was something very unnatural and strange, and he was a shy, quiet, bullied boy. He you know, when the time came for him to be drafted into World War II, like he faked an illness so he wouldn't be sent to the front or whatever, become a kamikaze pilot or something. Kamikaze. Um, so then it's like the rest of his life was an attempt to overcompensate for his failed sense of his own masculinity, I guess you could say. But I mean, it's
I get that, which is why, when I'm editing this video, as you will see later, I'm going to be doing some of that. I'll leave it as a little surprise for you, but just to say, straight after I've said this, you're going to see I'm going to be doing something quite similar because, yeah, I do a fair amount of that too.
okay. Well, I'll look forward to that. But yeah, I mean, the word that comes to mind when I think of him is the Greek word arete, meaning excellence, right? Like
Mm.
everything he did was just superb. So that's why I feel this sense of shame in his literary presence, you know, like the dedication of as I say, he's got all his daily activities, not only bodybuilding, he's also like organizing a private militia that which he hopes will, convince the Japanese army to like revolt against their colonial overlords, or he wants to change the constitution so that Japan can reinstitute its army, which they had to give up after the
Yeah.
defeat in World War II. Crazy stuff he's involved in. Yeah, also, he's got a young lover that he plans to commit, a Wagnerian love death with that didn't quite work out the way he hoped. But um, and then every night at 12, without fail, he goes to his study and, writes towards the end of his life the tetralogy I'm talking about until 6 a.m. Then he sleeps till noon, and then it starts all over again. So
Incredible, but in a way it's also that's the way to do it, right? That you have a sort of a tumultuous day life, if you like, where you are actually out. Maybe it's a great template to a certain extent. I mean, maybe not to that extent, but you really, really give all of yourself to the day, and then you retreat in the night into the shadowy yinish. So you're all yang in the day, and then you go into those depths of yourself. And I mean, you sort of, that's your template a little bit, I get a sense as well, right? That you do your day strutting around in day struts in Taipei, the sort of Taipei Joyce. And then in the evenings, midnight comes and you're, or maybe a little bit earlier, and you're pen in hand, sweating bullets. But we've talked before. It's like it's a real kind of right. Like instead of you doing weights, each sentence is like it's like you're pumping iron or something. That's the sense I get.
well, I would that this were true. I mean, I just don't have that dedication, or at least I've not developed that kind of routine yet.
Yeah.
I hopefully this year of the snake 2025 will be different. I've kind of, I realized in my reckoning of 2024, my self criticism, that I didn't spend as much time writing as I need to. But if Pessoa is right that all art is a form of literature, then we'd have to say that podcasting is writing too. So maybe there's some consolation in that.
I think so. Art is a very high-minded word, and as you say, when you read, we're going to come to Steinbeck in a bit, but when you read, the greats, you're like, well, you know, I can't, because they're like those great mountains, Mount Fuji or something, whatever, and but which is why I sort of quite like the idea of thinking of myself as a content creator now. No matter what content I'm creating, it could be anything, right? Because to me, that's more like, it feels more modest and also more doable. Like, because it's not a mountain, you're like just a little hillock, but you can be quite a nice hillock. I mean, there's some really, really cool little hillocks out there that you can kind of climb up and have a bit of a view. And maybe even build something on. Mountains can be quite intimidating and not necessarily always that inviting.
Well, yeah, that's true. Um, I'm not sure it makes me feel less ashamed of myself for my, lack of achievement, but it's probably not wrong to think that way. And there's a certain sickness to that drive, the drive of a Mishima, or I don't know, a Milton or a Proust, one of these epic, a Steinbeck, even, I guess you could
Yeah,
say.
I wouldn't want to. Even if I came out with, Proust's oeuvre, I wouldn't want Proust's life. I wouldn't want to essentially be kind of, bedbound with a sore back,
In a cork-lined room
in a
because of
cork-lined
your
room, and kind of,
asthma.
you know, um, sublimating my homosexual drives into something that people are going to, some sort of more hetero fiction that people are going to find more able to stomach.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. We've
On that
wittered on
note,
about
let's go.
Mishima.
Yeah, I mean, before we
Yeah.
do though, just to say, I just want to do a quick shout out because also I brought it to show you what I'm being fueled on here is today is Jade Star 8. I want to show you the cover of this cake. It's a combo three aged whites, and I really love the cover of this and just these cakes. I mean, of course, you're in tea cake paradise again. Envy. I mean, look at this. Is this not just utterly gorgeous? This is a work of art, right? I don't know what you think,
Mm-hmm.
but for me,
Well, I'd have to taste it, but I mean,
oh my
what
god.
does it taste like?
Uh, oh well, it's an aged white tea, so it's very very smooth. It's very floral. I think you would really like. I think you'd really like it if going by what you enjoy, which is that pomelo, which reminds me for our session, our I Ching session, I need to go and pick up some pomelos, some fresh pomelos. I haven't been able to find that jam, but I feel like you would enjoy it because it's got this sort of sweetness, but it's also got that huigan. It's not like a herbal tea or a tisane in the sense that it's kind of sweetish or
Mm-hmm.
fruity. It's got that kind of kick in the back, of that quench in the back, where you get that slight bitterness, but then the sweetness that sort of floods in. Um, but that was also as much to say that if my head disappears downwards, I am not like who was it? I think it was that Italian poet Garibaldi who had two of his ribs removed so he could basically give himself a blowjob. I am not giving myself.
Self-fillet.
I'm not self-filleting. Of course, I'll be
Yeah.
doing that throughout our discussion, as you will see. But I'm not actually self-filleting. Literally self-filleting, but I am, just getting my water going again so that I can keep the tea, keep the steeps coming.
Self-filleting in Proustian manner. That reminds me of the Aldous Huxley comment on Proust, which I don't remember, even though you call me Mr. Quotathon. I can't remember it, but I'm going to look it up here quickly. Oh, yes, here it is. Aldous Huxley described Marcel Proust as a hermaphroditic toad-like creature who spoons his own tepid juice over his face and body.
That is good. That is
Isn't that amazing?
that literary roast SCO. That is
Yeah, that's pretty
pretty damn
good.
good. Yeah.
And not necessarily inaccurate, but little bit unkind, and
Well, that's the joy of the
that's
roast.
and that's what some of us love about Proust. So all right, let's get into it here. The Idiots 2024 reading revelations as shared with Mark Will. That would be me. All right, so before we look at what you actually read, you wanted to talk about the kind of reader the idiot is. And by the way, thank you for the wonderful slides. It makes my job as host so much easier.
Oh, my pleasure. It was
Um,
fun to do them. Yeah.
so what can I ask you about this? Like, these are different types of the reader that you think you are, or it
Yeah.
depends on your mood, or like what's the most prevalent type? Just for those listening, we've got the forgetful hedonist, the ecstasy addict, the page bound lover, the
I've actually
story
changed. Sorry,
streamer.
I've actually changed that one because I made last minute edits, but then of course, for some reason I thought for some reason they would just pop up, right? I actually changed the page bound lover to the page bound narcissist, but I'll explain that in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
And then finally, we've got the Z library outlaw. So
uh,
take this wherever you want. You want to start at the
yeah, I mean,
top with the forgetful hedonist?
yeah, I mean, really, for me, this is just a 5-point disclaimer, because I feel that when people come to this kind of chat, they are expecting the person who is going to talk about books to be able to deliver a certain, a certain sort of um, somewhat rarefied, not necessarily rarefied, but at least uh, um, a certain functional kind of communication, like, for example, being able to remember the names of the characters in the books you love the most. And this is just me kind of essentially kind of saying to everybody, if you're coming for that, you ain't going to get any of that, because because right, take point one, the forgetful hedonist. um I remember so little of what I read, other than impressions, other than more kind of the feelings I had whilst reading. um
And then do you associate those feelings with particular works or particular authors, or do you forget those as well?
oh, no, I remember, because again, being a four, everything that the four idiot is about is trying to build up, trying to kind of make a kind of patchwork of various. I mean, we all do this to some extent, but some of us do this, sort of more so than others. Kind of like I don't know. I have no self, so all I have to do, I have to kind of take like books and music and various other things, and then sort of like paste them, kind of paper mache them over me. That's what art and culture is really about, so that then I can go, this is who I am,
Mhm.
and without those things, and in a way, that's what I think in some ways, art functions is the function of art for me, that it sort of allows me to actually see myself, or see the outlines of a self, and also the outlines of the self that I want to be, as opposed to the you know the sort of blah that's in the center of it all.
It allows you to create an identity.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, a
It's
couple of
very
things
teenage.
here.
I mean, I'm 53, right? But it's something we do as teenagers classically, and then
Mhm.
we maybe outgrow, a lot of people outgrow that, which is like, yeah, you find your favorite band, you find your favorite whatever it is, and then and that also gives you a way to be someone almost in the world, right? Like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm a Radiohead fan, and kind of, again, it's archetypal. People sort of know what that means, that then, right? If you say I'm a Radiohead fan, you are setting yourself up in the world as a certain kind of person, I think, as well.
Mhm.
And that does a lot of work. Then you don't have to really do much explanation. That's quite nice, because you can just say, well, I'm a Radiohead fan, and everyone kind of knows what kind of person you are.
Maybe now it means you're pro-Zionist, but we'll leave Tom York and
Right.
one of the Greenwood brothers out of it. But
Yeah.
um yeah, so couple of things here. Hedonist is an interesting choice because, the hedonist is all about
Mm.
pleasure. Is reading pleasurable for you? Or
Yeah,
is it just something necessary to, like, for the purpose of research so that you can do your content creation?
a little
Is
bit
it
of that,
always enjoyable? Yeah.
but I certainly, for me, and more, this has become more and more the case, right? It used to be slightly different, but more and more, as I approach death, and death can come at any time, I see absolutely no point in really. Yeah, okay, you'll push yourself through the first few chapters, but I see no point in reading other than hedonistically. One of my one person who I really love, and I associate with, is another Will, but with his Will in as his first name as opposed to his second, and that is, of course, Will Self. And
Yeah.
I was listening to an interview with Will Self, who's just Will Self. He's just such a great speaker and raconteur, and he was talking about how he reads, and I was quite surprised. But in a way, I think he would describe himself. Well, he's actually the remember everything, as we know, hedonist. But he was saying how he has, but that's also because he's a brutal motherfucker kind of 8 will to the max. But he was saying how he sort of he feels no obligation when he's reading to like, if you like the greatest work of literature, if he is not getting his rocks off, as it were, which kind of comes into the ecstasy addict, because he's also an ecstasy addict, which he chased through various substances as well, right? If he's not getting his rocks off, it ain't happening. And the way he describes his reading, which I found very interesting, because I've always seen him as like a very comprehensive reader, like, he's read everything and he reads it through all the way, is that he says he doesn't read like that. He'll read a bit of this, a bit of that. He's got like loads of things, different things on the go, and I'm that kind of reader as well. I'm kind of like, okay, literature is a sort of, I see it more as like a buffet table, and yes, I'll get really into maybe a particular dish, and I'll keep on going back and I'll finish it all off like I did with the Mishima. But I feel absolutely no guilt whatsoever for leaving whatever halfway through, or even 3 pages through, and thinking, well, I'll come back to that, but that looks more enticing over there.
Oh, interesting. See, I'm exactly the opposite. I am what I call a completionist. So not
Yeah.
only once I start something, if I consider it worth my while to start, and that, there's a certain bar that has to be passed before I'll even bother with it. But if I've decided, okay, this particular book is worth my attention, once I start it, I will finish it. Very rarely do I abandon it. I'm not saying it's never happened. Of course it has, but that is very rare. I feel if I do that, I feel like I'm somehow cheating in the I don't know, in the game of life, or the game of literature, or I don't know what. Of course I can't explain it, and it's pretty absurd, but I cannot do that. I cannot just give up. It's like it's like I'm a quitter, I once it started, I don't go halfway. I go all the way. And not only that, if I decide, okay, this I have this notion of the personal canon, right? Like there's the Western canon and the world literature canon and all that. I have my own personal canon. And when an author, let's say, has entered, I've deemed them worthy of canonical status in my own personal canon. I am a completionist, and I will read everything that I can from that particular author. So like Mishima, for me, he's canonical, and um, pretty much everything that's been translated into English, I've read, including a couple of biographies on him, and then films related to his work. Like I consume all of that because it's kind of like he's my teacher or guru, and so I've got to try to understand everything he's trying to tell me. Same with Proust, Joyce, recently, sometime around the period when I got into Mishima, Burroughs became very important to me, and I just read everything from Naked Lunch on. Oddly, I still haven't read Junkie and Queer, but now that movie's coming out, maybe I'll get back into those. But I feel like I'm losing my mind if I do that, if I take the buffet approach, just
Yeah,
as an
because
interesting
it
side
is
note.
an ADHD, I would say, pretty flaky way of reading, and that's why when you talk, I am genuinely full of admiration, and also, also because I want to be that. I want to be that kind of reader. I don't want to be the kind of reader I am. I don't want to be the forgetful hedonist and the page-bound narcissist and all. I don't want to be that, but hey, I am that. So I've got to live with that. Just quickly, sorry, I've just realized I'm freezing my bollocks off here because the heating is not at a winter temperature. Let me just quickly switch it up.
Can you still hear me? All right, this is an interlude where we can play some
It's okay.
heating music.
I'm back. I'm
Okay.
back.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned the ADHD reader. Maybe the opposite of that is the OCD reader. So, like,
Yeah, that's a
I,
good way
I
to.
think,
Yeah.
instinctively, naturally speaking, I'm more of the ADHD reader too. And in fact, when I first started reading seriously as a teenager, I could not focus. I couldn't complete one page. And so I forced myself to do it. And that's how I became the kind of reader that I am now. And maybe it's just a fear of going back to that going back to being that clueless, undisciplined, moronic teenager that I was, that prevents me from, uh, reading in that manner, or that necessitates that I read in the manner I do, if that makes sense. Like I just feel like I must do it. It's a compulsion. There's the OCD, right? But if I don't do it, I just feel like it's a sin almost. It's like a religious uh, dereliction of duty.
But I would also say, to kind of give a more, um, again, maybe mystical, transcendent spin on it, it's also a devotion, right? Because, and I think it's also it's one that maybe we all need more of. We need more of your devotional reading, because it's actually, I would imagine, right, that after you have done that devotional practice, um you come out with more, something. I would suggest that more is kind of something more worthy, or deeper, or more resonant, is imprinted into your cells than with the ADHD reader, who, again, it's like, okay, yeah, it's like someone who gets high. Lovely experience, but what really are we left with the next day? Nothing. Says a person who has done a lot of that in the last few years. Nothing.
Hmm.
Um, and that is disappointing, and I think is not soul nourishing. I would say that your kind of reading, whether we like it or not, at a psychospiritual level, is soul nourishing, and the extreme version of the ADHD reader is possibly even soul destroying.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, and I don't want to, try to establish a hierarchy and say one is better than the other. But it's just, for me personally, I feel unmoored. Maybe it has to do with my record keeping, right? Like I have, for the past, I don't know, 25, 30 years, I've kept pretty consistent records of like everything I read on a yearly basis, and I can't like write it down until I finished it. If I start something but don't finish it, I can't put it on the list. It doesn't count, you know. It's like I started something but I didn't finish it. Nope, that doesn't go on the list. So there's like an obligation self-imposed to finish so that it can be recorded, and then it's official, and it just remains in my raggedy ass notebook that no one else looks at. Although, you know, now I post my annual reading list on Substack and Goodreads and whatever, but um it's just for my own personal, I don't know if it's satisfaction, development, research, I call it. It's research, because that's the fuel uh that is necessary for the, creative energy I need to
Mm.
make whatever it is I'm working on, books, music, a podcast, whatever. Like I need that nourishment. But the other part of this phrase, forgetful, is also interesting, because with the development of, I know you listen to a lot of audiobooks. That's not really something I do, but I have read quite a few ebooks, and I have found that I retain almost nothing from ebooks that I read, especially if they happen to be fiction. Some nonfiction, I can recall nonfiction I've read on the iPad, for example, but fiction, it just I lose it. I can't retain it. It's very strange. I just wonder, is it something about the tactile quality, right? Like I've got a book, I'm holding it in my hands, I can physically turn the pages rather than swipe. I can take a pen or pencil and underline. I can write notes if I want to. I mean, you can do that with an ebook too. You can highlight with your finger. You can even highlight different colors. Like I've done that. Like, oh, favorite passages highlighted in yellow, important names and places blue, um, themes pink or whatever, right? You can't do that. You could if you had highlighters, I guess, but I don't. Like with regular paperbacks or hardcovers, I'm just using a pen. So I don't have an answer to that, but I've read that there have been studies saying that, yeah, it's actually true. You can't retain as much from ebooks as you can from like paper books, whether paperback or hardcover. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I was looking up just while you were talking that it's a book I haven't read, but I think it would be a good one to dip into. This book by Marianne Wolf called Proust and the Squid. Proust is popping up again, something like that.
Hmm.
I think, right, which is about the reading brain and all the sort of the studies that have been done on that. And yeah, again, if we ever get to them, if we ever actually get to the books, because this is a great thing, we could probably talk for probably about 3 hours just on this. But so- but yeah, most of the books that, possibly even all the books that we're going to look at, I don't think, even though I have paper copies of, in fact, a number of them, because I buy them. We're down to the, this devotional aspect of the book has really, really affected me. I will buy the paper copy, but it's more like to have it almost as an object rather than even to look at it. The idea is always to read it again on the page, but I think probably everything that I'm going to talk about today has been, again, to pick up on the story streamer, has been listened to with Speechify initially, but now 11 Labs, which is, or 11 Reader as it's now called, I think, which is the free app, and incredible if you're looking for something free that can read anything, um, or or on an iPad. And maybe
Okay.
that also adds to, and that's something about the ecstasy as well. I'm trying to kind of compress this all so we can move to the next slide, but it's something about the ecstasy as well, because I think sometimes maybe I can also get more of an ecstatic hit if I'm like in motion, because very often I'm walking or I'm doing something and I'm listening. And so I'm getting, it's like I'm able to be sort of moving, and my brain is occupied, and somehow that seems to increase um, ecstatic potential for me, as opposed to sometimes, again, we've all become, I'm very aware of the fact of how more ADHD my head is, due to screens and whatnots. And so that seems to be more of an ADHD kind of setup now for us, right? That you've got to have like three things going on at the same time. And if you've just got you and the page, in a way it's wonderful, but it can also be like, oh, but hang on, shouldn't something else be happening too whilst I'm looking at this sentence?
Yeah.
you know
Can't I watch a YouTube video and listen to music while I read?
exactly. Yeah.
Can't isn't that
And
and
the
maybe it
simple
is.
answer is actually
Maybe it is
no.
possible.
You can't. You can't if you actually want to give yourself fully, which is why, yeah, when I am listening to whatever I'm listening to, I have to be either walking or doing housework, doing something where I'm total autopilot. Otherwise, I won't. it's I might as well not even have it there. Yeah,
You don't have the necessary focus and attention.
no.
Yeah. Well, this word ecstasy is, I mean, it appears in several of your slides. Should we wait to discuss that in greater detail, or I mean, when
Well,
I
no,
hear
I mean,
that word,
yeah, let's jump ahead. But I mean, let's maybe not linger on this because this, again, as I say, this is more of just a disclaimer. And it, um, but the thing we haven't mentioned yet, which I'll just throw in there, because I'm also, even though I know I've kind of sent this link to you and Tomek, is what do you think of Z Library, right? Because Z Library for me was just like, I grew up in South Africa, and it was very, very hard to get our hands on books and music, and because it was, coming from the other side of the world, and when it arrived, it would cost the earth. And so ever since I was a child, I always had the sense that of there not being enough, like having this voracious appetite, and they're just not being able to get the stuff I wanted. The books I wanted were not in the libraries. I could never afford to go and buy them. And then now we have this thing called Z Library. Anyway, put the thing in, which is this totally illegal website, but it really is. It now everything's there. Everything's
yeah,
there, and I just feel like it's an utter godsend. But I could also understand, particularly for you as I don't know how you would feel. I did actually look. You're not on there, but how would you feel if you went onto Z Library and Ernest Games was there for everyone as a free download?
well, my self-publishing guru JJ Green says, like, in most cases the exposure is more important than the potential loss of
I agree.
income. So, at this particular point in my so-called career, like, I'd probably be okay with it. I wouldn't
Well,
try to
give
have
me
it
the word,
taken
and
down.
I'm more than happy to. I'm more than happy to leak some Mark Will onto Z Library, because also
Y-
I don't know,
Yeah,
I sort of see it like you're talking about the canon, right? That
yeah,
is the canon of everything. That is
yeah.
Borges's. That's that Borgesian. Borges saw it all, right? It's
Mm,
the Library of Babel. Everything is there, and if you are, as long as you've got an internet connection, you can be the poorest, whoever, right, living in a country where you just can't get any of this stuff, but you can go on a Z Library and you can find anything. And I don't know, they've tried to, God damn it, they have tried to shut that down a million times. They've chased them, they've litigated, they have, and I am on the side of Z Library. I'm like, I'm like, go, yeah, the Z Library.
yeah,
It's like Z Library rides again, because it's been shut down for a while, and I've had to go onto the dark web even at times to find it. But they keep on springing back up, because I actually believe they're, I mean, as much as I'm also on the side of writers, and writers need to make money, etc. But I feel like fundamentally they're on the side of giving literature to everyone, and that has to be a good thing. Not just literature,
yeah.
giving knowledge to everyone.
Well,
You know?
the whole notion of copyright is a very recent um, conception, right? There was no copyright in Shakespeare's day.
Yeah,
This is how great works of literature from the past were transmitted. They were shared. They were passed down. They were pirated, I guess you could say. I mean, I think in the Don Quixote episode on texting, we were talking about how, Cervantes was actually condemning the people who had pirated his books in part two of Don Quixote. But so, that it's even before copyrights, there were there was like a sense of ownership with certain texts. But I think we have to be kind of flexible about that. Like if the purpose of Z library or Z library, sorry, is it sounds to me like it's the Napster of literature, right? So
Yeah,
if
100%.
the purpose is to, of course, maybe that's not a good example because Napster made Sean Parker a lot of money, right? Like if some asshole millionaire, billionaire is making money off of it, that's different, right? It's like if
Yeah.
it's a kind of Amazon type thing where Jeff Bezos is using the profits of nobodies like me to buy himself another boat or whatever, another yacht. Not that he's gonna do that with just my works, but like the millions of nobodies who are publishing their stuff on his site, that's different, right?
Yeah.
But if it's just a matter of getting my work into the hands of more people who might be interested, might later buy a book or donate
Totally.
to
Yeah.
my Substack or subscribe to my YouTube channel or something like that, that's different. I mean, it's kind of
I
like
actually think that that's a brilliant analogy because maybe, right? Maybe if the publishers can get the fuck out of their, 19th, 20th century head business model, right? I would suggest that the way forward is like a Spotify of books, because I would have no problem whatsoever paying whatever it is, whatever I pay Spotify, 10, 12 quid a month to have access to absolutely everything, to have access to Z Library, and to have access in a way that also gives me greater usability, utility, functionality. I would love that. I would love that. I would love, even though, as we know, Spotify is also problematic, but at least it's, you could argue it's a sort of
very
a bit
much
of
so.
a halfway house. But I don't think publishers are ever going to do that because, yeah, for all sorts of reasons, and it's a different, they're different objects as well, and that's
Well, there are publishers and there are publishers. I just recently read, well, last year, this is one of my 2024 reading highlights. I don't know if it's a highlight, but it's something I read. Roberto Colasso's The Art of the Publisher.
all right.
And so he talks about the publisher as a cultural taste maker or a force for influencing the culture, and his own Adelphi books or whatever his imprint was called. I mean, they're not like, they're anti Amazon, and they're like anti even ebook and certainly audiobook. Like they're all about the quality of the pages, the font, the artwork that's chosen, the cover design, so that it really is the art of the publisher. That's something that with my own Cadmus and Harmony Media imprint, I want to, be on the side of, I guess, or support or advocate for. But that's different from, you know, just take any random mainstream uh, publisher that you can think of, and here's one. What are these people called? FSG with their fucking fish logo. That is what are they? Farrar,
Farrar, Straus,
Strauss,
and Giroux.
and Giroux. Yeah. So they, I'm not like concerned for their well-being, but for the small independent publishers like my own imprint, Cadmus and Harmony Media, like I I you know the when I first started this venture, I did conceive of a hierarchy. It's right. It's like yes, we'll produce ebooks, we'll produce audiobooks, but the ultimate textual experience is the paperback or hardcover if there happens to be a hardcover version. So fine, download the ebook, read that, download the audiobook, listen to
Yeah,
that. But at the end of the day, if you want the ultimate experience, you should purchase the actual book because we did spend
Which
time
people are now doing,
on
right,
the cover.
with albums, I guess, right? I mean, people are going back to like vinyl and things like that, and maybe that's the way to do it. I mean, make all the stuff, make that free.
Yes.
Actually, just say to people like, right, if you want to get a sense of it, because I actually think that's how it works. I do genuinely believe, and I see that with myself, that I'll read something or I'll listen to it, and if I fall in love with it, I will go and buy it quite
Yes.
often, because I then
Yeah.
because I want it, and I can only really feel like it's mine. I can only really feel like this Simon Critchley's mysticism is mine with its amazing Bernini red. And again, it's also the art. It's such a beautiful, sexy book. um
Hmm.
like I can only really own it if I buy the book, and
Yes.
I have the ebook, I have the audio book. I mean, it's on Spotify. You can listen to it on Spotify, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as about being able to wrap your fingers around it, even if you don't crack it open and actually
Yeah.
do the page. And it also, because he does, he's in a very sort of Siboldian way. It's got these incredible sort of black and white pictures. This is an amazing picture of right at the end of I mean, just incredible kind of pictures. There's this incredible picture of, where is it, Nick Cave, like a very young Nick Cave, in the midst of some, I don't know, in his heroin chic phase. um yeah, that's what you want books for, right? That's what books are about, I think.
Yeah. So if we conceive of ebooks and audiobooks as lost leaders, right? They're just basically they're for promotional purposes. It's like a music video, right? Like, oh, you like this, then
Exactly.
buy the album. You like this, then buy the paperback. I mean, you mentioned Sartre earlier. I'm thinking of a comment he made once. He's like, writers' livelihoods and their well-being vary with the times. In some ages, they're well fed, and in other ages, not so much. So
Mm.
maybe this is the period when we're not well fed, and okay, so that's just what we have to accept. Maybe there are ways we can improve our lot, but maybe we're just in an age where we have to basically accept donations. I think I've been thinking about how to, like, um, sustain this enterprise, and so maybe the best model is just one of donation, right? Like, if you appreciate this content, please buy a book. Here's a link. If you appreciate this
Yeah.
content, you can donate here. You can become a subscriber here. Just whatever you're comfortable with. It's all free. Take sample it as you will. Take of it what you want. But if you value it, then you're welcome to make a donation. I'm going to keep doing it regardless. It's here no matter what, but this is the situation. Like, this doesn't this is not really sustainable if there is no kind of financial support. Or I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe I could do it indefinitely, but maybe
Mm.
not.
Mm. Shall we
All right.
move to some actual
Yes.
books? Well, actually,
Yeah.
we're gonna have a poem, and I think that's gonna be the perfect palate cleanser. You know what? You know what this video is gonna be, which is great. I'm loving it. This is gonna be like one of the rabbit holes that I get sucked into on YouTube, is those super, very often super rich assholes. No, lovely people, compersion, super rich people who go off, take themselves off to these amazing Michelin, 3-star Michelin restaurants, and eat these, just like, the 28 course tasting menu and drinking the Grand Krug champagnes, and they proudly show the bill at the end. Oh, this cost me 7,000 euros with change. And I love watching those videos. But I feel like this is like the poor man's version of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
like we're going through the but and of course what you need, we've done like the first, I don't know, four courses of the 28 course tasting menu, is you actually do need to go and have a pee. And I do need to go and have a pee, but before I go and have a pee, maybe just I'm going to pretend to be Mark Will. I'm going to pretend that I can just quote this by off the top of my head, but I've just looked it up, and maybe this is about ultimately the kind of reader I am, and I know this is the kind of reader you are, and it feels like a good summation, right? Good old Franz. I'm going to read the whole one because very often people just quote that one line. But Kafka, if the book we are reading does not wake us, as with a fist hammering on our skulls, then why do we read it? Good God. We also would be happy if we had no books, and such books that make us happy we could, if need be, write ourselves. What we must have are those books that come on us like ill fortune, or good fortune, I would say, like the death of one we love better than ourselves, like suicide. A book must be an ice axe to break the sea frozen inside us. What we need are books that hit us, that like punch us, right? I mean, I feel like you're someone who's looking for that too. That's the ecstasy, that like smash us in the face, like a most painful misfortune, like the death of someone we loved more than we love ourselves, that make us feel as though we had been banished to the woods, far from any human presence, like a suicide. It's interesting he mentions suicide quite a bit, doesn't he? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. I mean,
That's
it all,
beautiful.
right? You know?
That's the quote that Bowie appropriates in Ashes to Ashes. Want an axe to break the ice. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
we got to
you
put
can
that in
talk
the
to
show
that.
notes.
You can actually talk to that. Talk to our one devoted follower of the live stream. While I just go and have a quick pee, if you excuse me, 1 moment.
Well, I'll take a quick break myself.
Okay, cool.
We'll be right back.
Ooh. Where are we? I think I'm gonna have to line up some snacks here. If that was the throat clearing, right? That was the throat clearing part. I'm gonna need snacks. These are quite nice. Nairns, fruit and seed oat cakes. They're all healthy. They're all super healthy. They're guilt free. Guilt free. Those are the kind of snacks I like. It's too much guilt. We have too much guilt already. I do. So you want guilt free snacks. And then these are made by the magnificent Aldi. They are biscuits, cookies, you would say, Mark, but but these are their breakfast biscuits, which means um, there's less sugar. They're basically for people to dunk into their coffee, or tea for that matter. Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted.
No, it's all good. I was just delivering my little snack my snack spiel. Okay.
snack
Well,
spiel.
well, if
I
that
was
was
looking
if
for
that was the
my.
throat clearing part of this, because
I,
we're going to go into Bridget. Yeah, we're going to actually move into the next slide. Yeah.
oh yes, yes. That and hold on. Yeah. Okay. So we changed slides, people. The intro lasted about an hour.
About an
So
hour.
now we're we didn't start till 40
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
minutes after the stream began. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was about an hour for the intro. So now we're into the actual text that the idiot read in 2024. I was looking for my Colosso book and I can't find it, and so I'm distracted by that. But I'll try to focus. So one of
Bridget.
the I like how you organized your reading according to genre. And the first genre that we're going to look at is what you call ecstatic poetry. There were several collections that you read this year, and you have chosen to focus on this collection called Song by this poet that you'll tell us about.
Bridget Pegeen Kelly. Yeah. Is she someone who's ever been on your radar? Have you, until I sent you this poem that I'm going to also kick us off with?
Well,
Have you
I
have you read it? Have you?
I don't know. I don't think I've heard of her, but as soon as I saw the cover and read about a goat's head, I was immediately drawn to it because, of course, I'm in the process of completing my novel, Goat Songs. So we
Oh
got
right.
song,
Oh
goat's head.
wow.
I mean, very,
I didn't know that.
very
Yeah.
relevant to what I'm doing. So tell
Oh,
us about.
she then I think would be super worth reading.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to give a huge amount of spiel about Bridget because I wanted to read. Although I was thinking about this morning, kind of doing a bit of prep for this, and I was thinking, am I really going to read the whole of Song or just the first part? But I really would like to read it if you're up for that, because it's probably going to take about 2.5 minutes because it's a longish poem. But I feel like, in a way, it's such a great intro into her work, and it's also really um, in some way an encapsulation of I suppose everything that she stands for as an artist and as a poet and her whole aesthetic. But I suppose to give my why I chose her was at the beginning of last year. Yeah, sort of. So this time last year, I guess, I was still in the midst of what I call my kind of sackcloth and ashes, substance abuse, um, um, midlife crisis stint, which was precipitated by somebody dumping me at the end of 2021 and me going into full tilt drama queen, um, you know, kind of, well, yeah, woe is meism, like
Mhm.
properly for 3 years of just sort of crawling around, feeling sorry for myself, and making probably quite a number of feeling sorry for myself kind of podcasts. And at the beginning of last year, I fell in love. I mean, she'd always been on my radar, but I really, really fell hard for Bridget Pegeen Kelly and these 3 collections. A song I think is her third last. I can't remember. And
Mhm.
what I really fell for, because I stumbled into our tryst by thinking I'd really love to hear her reading this poem, and so I went in search of poetry readings. So she's a writer from the kind of late 20th century. I can't remember. I should have looked this up, but I can't remember when she died. I think she died in the early aughts. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I could find some stuff? And there was very little, but I did track down. I was very excited to track down 3 or 4 readings that had been recorded and can be found on that amazing repository, Internet Archive, where you can find some 80s and 90s readings by her. And I so fell in love with these readings, also because she reads her own work, but she's as likely to read other people as well. It's like she does these like cover versions, I guess. It's like,
Yep.
it's like, someone doing on stage, and like and the work she chooses to cover is also then reflects back and kind of enters into dialogue with her own work. And so I went on a bit of a journey with her, and the journey was, I thought, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read myself aloud and record for my Poetry Koan podcast, because I have this podcast called Poetry Koan. I'm going to record aloud all 3 of those books, because it was a search for ecstasy. I thought, if I can read them aloud, all of these poems, I can somehow take them into myself. I can kind of live them. And the idea was to read them in sequence, and then also and where I had actually her reading, I would then also have her reading rather than me. So it was a way of kind of like me reading and her reading, but having like the complete works, because I thought also be a lovely thing, because she is really renowned by those who are into late 20th century poetry, I guess. She's really, really a renowned writer, and I thought people would enjoy that and appreciate that in some way. And so that's what kind of got me. I was, very, very deeply into Bridget Pegeen Kelly for about a month, and I would get up every day and I would read these poems aloud and listen to her readings, and I made, maybe we can put it in the links, a couple of episodes of Poetry Koan, which were also me writing about some of these poems, and also writing about some of her cover version poems.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, that's the long and the short of it, because it also allowed me, I think, at that time to I wanted to get out of my own head, and poetry, well, reading can do that, but poetry can do that in a very poetry, again, can be like music in that sense, right? It's sort of like great songs that you love, that for that 3.5 minutes you don't exist as a self. You are out of the ego cage. You are just simply transported, right? Transported. That's what I'm looking for in everything that I read, or that I love, in terms of a reading experience. I just want to be transported. I don't want to be the idiot reading. I just want to be there. I want to be in that
Well,
song.
that's what ecstasy is, right? It's literally etymologically standing outside
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
oneself.
Yeah.
Now, for
Yeah.
those that don't know, Ms. Kelly was actually an American poet and teacher. She lived She was born in 1951 and died in 2016. So this collection, Song Poems, was apparently published in 1995.
Yeah.
So go ahead and let's hear your
Okay.
recitation.
Yeah. You know, before I say it, before I read it, I was also, because I sort of thought, well, we'd start with this, right? I didn't realize we'd be like an hour in. And I was going to sort of say, well, I'm sure you know this, that you know, now that I make YouTube videos, I know this very well because I can actually look at the data in terms of how videos are watched, and you know, it's interesting, isn't it? And well, most YouTube videos, not just mine, people, you know, it could be quite it could be a real, yeah, it's good, good for the ego, right? A real kind of slap about the chops for the ego, because you, even if you get, like, let's say, like my last year, I did a video which got 3,000 views. I mean, most of my videos get like 5 views or 3 views or 50 views, but this one got 3,000 views, and it was mainly because I was riding off the back of a cultural phenomenon at the time. This Tiny Desk concert of these two mad Argentinian rockers, Paco Amoroso and Catriel, and which got 20 million views. And so, you know, I made a silly little video. I literally did it in a day and suddenly get 3,000 views. But even on my 3,000 view, like, hallelujah, I finally made it on YouTube. I look at that, and it's only 10 minutes long, and like 95% of those views, they clicked away after a minute and a half. So I was gonna say to you, like, okay, well, fuck it, let's just really go for it. Like, let's actually read a 3.5-minute poem or a 3-minute poem, and because those people, they'll click away after the first line anyway, and that's fine. And we're just left with, you know, Tomek, Madeline, Rob. I'm trying to think of the people I know who will possibly watch to the end of a video that I make. You know, those people. But I think that's maybe, I don't know what you think as a content creator. I'm almost starting to embrace that. I'm starting to be like, yeah, that's what it's about. That's what I'm not making content for the ADHD average standard lovely YouTube watcher, because they mean nothing to me and I mean nothing to them. I'm making it for, I don't know, I'm making it for those crazy people who, for some reason, actually want to sit and listen to. I mean, I'm speaking to somebody who has made, like, what was the longest texting you did last year? Was it like 4 hours or something?
Probably something like that. Yeah, maybe one of those
What's your line on that?
one of those T.S. Eliot episodes. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
whatever.
I
I just
I
see
only
it.
made it through about 2 hours of that. I still
Oh,
haven't finished that.
I I was probably asleep through half of it, so you know,
But it was
no
all
need to
good. I mean, that's
apologize.
the thing. It was genuinely all good. But
Well, I don't, you know, I don't try to place a value judgment on it. It's like a task that I have to complete, and so I'm just going to do it, and then I put it out there, and then it sinks or swims. You know,
is
it's
it a
like,
task or is it a pleasure? Because again,
well,
I mean,
it's
with you and
for
Tomek,
me,
it's like
for
listening
me,
to
it's
two buddies at the pub having like this really long winding. I was going to be both, right?
sure,
Long winding, long-winded conversation. But those are the best
yeah,
conversations. And also, I think we have a hunger, us lonely. I, we're all kind of, you know, lonely, existentially. What's the word? Cut off, I guess, in this crazy virtual world of ours. That's also the thing we're all hungering for. That's why people will sit and listen to like, you know, again, you know, a 4-hour Rogan or something, right? Because we want
yeah,
that. We want that
right,
experience.
yeah. Um, well, I mean, I guess it depends because maybe there's some conversations at the pub that you don't want to listen in on for 4 hours, and maybe there are others that you do want to listen in on for 4 hours or more. So I don't have an answer for it. Again, for me, it's just something that I know I'm going to do, and so I just do it, and we go until we're finished. You know, yes, it's pleasurable, but it's also a kind of duty. Like we can't just
Yeah.
stop before we're done. We have to like be comprehensive and cover all the content and whatever. I can always clip it. I
There is
can.
content and content, right? Because maybe I'm just narcissist, and maybe we're both just narcissistic enough to believe that actually what we are trying to do here is bring the best of ourselves. And you might not want the best of ourselves, but we are trying to bring the best of ourselves to this content, right? And I would like to believe that, okay, if you went on a hike with us, it's not like we're just sort of sitting here gossiping about, I don't know, Taylor Swift's pantyhose or something, right? Which I mean, some people will sit and listen to hours of that too.
Oh yeah, probably more so than what we're talking about, but yeah,
They
I
were
mean, we
trying.
obviously we feel that there's some value or insight in
Yeah.
what we're presenting, but maybe it takes us longer to get there
Yeah.
than some people have the patience to endure. But that's, again, I don't see that as my concern or a problem. Like that's the beauty of clips. You pick out the highlights and shorts, which I'm now
Oh,
like.
you're shortastic at the moment. My feed is currently just like flooded with your shorts. It's like
Oh,
short clips.
really?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I don't know
okay.
why.
Well,
But
I'm sorry
literally,
about
I
that.
go on. No, no, no. It's great. It's great
Well,
because at
well,
least
I
I'm
mean,
actually getting
that this
something. But
is
most
because
most
of
of
the
most of
platform I
the other
use.
shorts
This.
are like sort of, I don't know, 18-year-old women just sort of like wobbling their boobs around, and that's all you want
Yeah,
to really do if you're an 18-year-old. Just
yeah,
wobble your boobs around, and us middle-aged men are just sort of sitting there mesmerized like that, right?
yeah.
Um, I
Right.
don't know why that's in there. It's not like I'm necessarily looking for that, but yeah. Whereas at least your shorts, hey, I actually might get a get a little tidbit of information.
Well, it's nothing to do with me. It's not like my own innovation. It just happens to be that the platform I use generates these shorts with the help of, you guessed it, AI. And so I can go in and edit because of course the if you just go with the draft that AI produces, it's garbage. So it does take quite a bit of work to edit, especially the text, and then also the video sometimes too. So whatever, it's just an experiment. But yeah, it has gotten some attention from random people who wouldn't otherwise necessarily follow the Mark Will Wright YouTube channel. So it's
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
a lot of
Yeah.
it got some attention from devout Christians who found my
Really.
comments on the Bible blasphemous when we
Oh.
were talking about pilgrimizing.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, 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 it's good.
That's like nectar to the Enneagram 8 challenges.
Yes,
I don't know. It's
yeah,
like fuel for the machine, isn't it? It's like, yeah, oh, I've managed to piss a few people off. Brilliant. I mean, that's
yeah.
what Morrissey is about, right? Well, anyway, we won't talk about Morrissey now. I'm sure we'll get to him, but
Well,
that's
yeah, one
another
guy
podcast.
one guy said, now you need to repent and serve Jesus. And so I replied to him, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." And then he replies to me, um, "Preaching is not judging, son." And so I replied to him, "Forgive me, Father." And that was the end
Lovely
of the
exchange.
exchange. Yeah, I mean, it was nice. It was pretty respectful overall. And then another guy sent me like a he didn't even send the clip. He just said like a Serbian chant victory song, and it's based on the book of Revelation. I said, "Oh, thanks for making me aware of this beautiful, sublime piece of music." So yeah, some interesting exchanges there. But anyway,
Anyway, right, let's do it. Ecstatic poetry. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is song by Bridget Pegeen Kelly. Um,
You couldn't get an more Irish name than that.
indeed, even though she was born in Palo Alto. Um, okay, listen. There was a goat's head hanging by ropes in a tree. All night it hung there and sang, and those who heard it felt a hurt in their hearts and thought they were hearing the song of a night bird. They sat up in their beds and then they lay back down again. In the night wind, the goat's head swayed back and forth, and from far off it shone faintly, the way the moonlight shone on the train track miles away, beside which the goat's headless body lay. Some boys had hacked its head off. It was harder work than they had imagined. The goat cried like a man and struggled hard, but they finished the job. They hung the bleeding head by the school and then ran off into the darkness that seems to hide everything. The head hung in the tree. The body lay by the tracks. The head called to the body to the head. They missed each other. The missing grew large between them until it pulled the heart right out of the body, until the drawn heart flew toward the head, flew as a bird flies back to its cage and the familiar perch from which it trills. Then the heart sang in the head, softly at first and then louder, sang long and low until the morning light came up over the school and over the tree, and then the singing stopped. The goat had belonged to a small girl. She named the goat Broken Thorn Sweet Blackberry, named it after the night's bush of stars, because the goat's silky hair was dark as well water, because it had eyes like wild fruit. The girl lived near a high railroad track. At night she heard the trains passing, the sweet sound of the train's horn pouring softly over her bed, and each morning she woke to give the bleating goat his pail of warm milk. She sang him songs about girls with ropes and cooks in boats. She brushed him with a stiff brush. She dreamed daily that he grew bigger, and he did. She thought her dreaming made it so. But one night the girl didn't hear the train's horn, and the next morning she woke to an empty yard. The goat was gone. Everything looked strange. It was as if a storm had passed through while she slept, wind and stones, rain stripping the branches of fruit. She knew that someone had stolen the goat and that he had come to harm. She called to him all morning, and into the afternoon she called and called. She walked and walked. In her chest, a bad feeling, like the feeling of the stones gouging the soft undersides of her bare feet. Then somebody found the goat's body by the high tracks, the flies already filling their soft bottles at the goat's torn neck. Then somebody found the head hanging in a tree by the school. They hurried to take these things away so that the girl would not see them. They hurried to raise money to buy the girl another goat. They hurried to find the boys who had done this, to hear them say, "It was a joke, it was nothing but a joke." But listen, here is the point. The boys thought to have their fun and be done with it. It was harder work than they had imagined, this silly sacrifice, but they finished the job, whistling as they washed their large hands in the dark. What they didn't know was that the goat's head was already singing behind them in the tree. What they didn't know was that the goat's head would go on singing just for them long after the ropes were down, and that they would learn to listen, pail after pail, stroke after patient stroke. They would wake in the night thinking they heard the wind in the trees or a night bird, but their hearts beating harder. There would be a whistle, a hum, a high murmur, and at last a song, the low song a lost boy sings, remembering his mother's call. Not a cruel song, no, 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 not cruel at all. This song is sweet. It is sweet. The heart dies of this sweetness.
Hmm. Well read.
Whew, whew, that gets me every time. That is that axe. As soon as you get to the part about her um raising this goat, and this goat being like her child, and I just want to start bawling. I really
Hmm.
fucking do. And that's what you want to feel, and you don't always get that from poetry. In fact, very, very little, which is why I think ecstatic poetry is very often not what most poems are. Most poetry is just like meh. I think 99% of the poems I read are a bit like meh. But when you get that one poem that breaks the ice, the ice within, wow.
Well, it's literally tragic poetry too,
Yeah.
The the of course I'm thinking about this because I'm writing this novel
Yeah.
called Goat Songs, right? But the etymology of tragedy, you know what it is? Literally goat song. Goat
Oh,
song.
wow. Oh,
That is what it
wow.
means. So
Huh.
um yeah, and the reason for that is because, well, there are different theories. One is that the winner of the Greek tragic competition, like they would have a Dionysian festival, and playwrights, tragedians would compete with one another to see who would write the best or most acclaimed tragedy, and the winner would receive a goat. So tragedy is the goat song, right? There are other theories,
Crazy. I don't
maybe
think I ever knew that. And here is somebody
maybe
who studied literature at university, like, whoa.
well, some people say, oh, some of the first tragic actors wore, like, you know, goat skins. That was part of their costume. But I think the most plausible theory is that the winner of the competition would receive a goat. So anyway, that is what it means. Tragedy is goat song. And then of course it also reminds us of the biblical scapegoat, the poor goat is like sacrificed, as the poem says. um I don't know if it's for the sins of the community or the sins of these three fucking hooligans that take this poor girl's pet that's like a child. But yeah, the reaction for me is not so much ecstatic as like a kick in the balls, which is, maybe the same thing, right? Like the physical. I guess I feel it more in the gut than in the nut sack, but you know, like the physical sensation one gets hearing the recitation is undeniable, and I guess
Yeah,
conducive to a kind of
yeah.
ecstasy. It's like it
Ecstasy.
take
Yeah.
or catharsis. Maybe it's cathartic poetry. Catharsis is, of course, an aspect of tragedy that Aristotle identifies. We there's a purging. We
Mm.
see the horrific played out on the stage, or in this case, on the page, or in the across the airwaves as you're reading it to us. So we experience a kind of cathartic reaction.
Yeah. It's a very deeply melancholic, and I would even say, go so far as to say, kind of a tortured, you know, as Christ was on the cross, a tortured ecstasy. And it is, and maybe it's only, yeah, poetry can reach for that, but maybe only in song. Again, that's why both of us are great Morrissey lovers, because there's something about Morrissey's voice, right? Something he does that's kind of like, oh, what, there's something there's something when Morrissey's really in his full, like, Enneagram 4, dark, tortured, self-pitying, it wouldn't last, whatever. Fuck. It's you know another kind of person who comes to mind, or even a title of a song, is this Elvis Costello song called Useless Beauty. and
Mm.
not a great album, but a great song. And I feel like this poem, as all great ecstatic poetry and tragic poetry is it captures the brutal, terrible, awful, and yet beautiful, ecstatic beauty of of life in general, nature, red and tooth and claw, but also of the human animal who is, um, we are all ultimately centaurs, aren't we? We've got that searching, ecstasy-seeking, transcendent thing going on, but also we are brutal motherfuckers.
Mm.
I don't know why that when I read it recently, that line about their large hands. I wonder why. I wonder what she's. That really stuck out for me. Like they're washing their large hands, but these are children. What is it that feels very pertinent somehow? That feels key to me. That line. What do you make of that line? Why
They're
are the hands
brutish.
large?
They're clumsy and brutish and violent, like most. How do we commit violence? It's usually with our hands, our large hands, right?
Yeah.
Some hand the hands of some mothers are bigger than others. Um, those of us with the bigger hands, the larger hands, are the more likely to be violent and to take advantage of the weak. The weak in this scenario being the poor little girl, right? Like compared, maybe it's from her perspective, compared to her tiny hands, these boys must have, you know,
I think they've
gargantuan
actually got
hands
quite small hands, but I think in the act of doing what they did, they are no longer children. They are now they are now, and they will of course also then be by society be judged in a
as
way
adults. Yeah.
as adults. Because the other thing that comes up for me, and very interestingly, was actually occurring when she was writing this. Although who knows if she was aware of this, right? Because I mean, this book came out in 1995, but I imagine this poem was written in the early 90s. And I don't know if this is something you were aware of. I mean, but of course, if you're British, or British adjacent, as I am, this is a key part of late 20th century British history, and that is the Jamie Bulger case. Um, do you know about Jamie Bulger?
No, I don't.
So on in February, 12th of February 1993, in Merseyside, right, these two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, they essentially abducted and then led away. Yeah, they abducted. Abducted is maybe too strong a word for it. They found this little boy who was out shopping with his mum, and they drew him away from her, and they led him away to these train tracks, and then they tortured and murdered him. This 2-year-old little boy,
Oh,
and understandably, even though they were 10 years old, they were essentially put away for life. Although recently, if you could, you look online, um, uh, one of them, I can't remember who, has is now out for good behavior.
rehabilitated. Yeah.
Yeah, and understandably, that then prompted a little bit of a kind of like, right, we've got to find this motherfucker and kill him. Even though he of course has they've given him a whole new identity and probably even etc etc. Blake Morrison wrote a really fantastic book about this called As If, because he went to the trial of these two boys at the time,
Hmm.
and tried, and the book is grappling with like how how can two, and as you can imagine, those two 10-year-olds had suffered all sorts of terrible abuses themselves, and great all sorts of socioeconomic deprivation, and um and again, that's the terrain I think that Bridget Begin Kelly is often in, that you can't really take a moral line with any of this, because it's almost like just nature, red in tooth and claw, working itself out in terribly perverse and horrific ways at times.
Yeah, well, you alluded to the Tennyson line. I'm also thinking of the Hawthorne line from Young Goodman Brown. And I did have to look this up, so this is not off the top of my head. The fiend in his own shape is less hideous than when he rages in the breast of man.
Yeah.
So like it really takes the human to incarnate evil. There's evil as an abstract concept, but when that evil is played out in the human drama, it's more horrific than like the worst thing that nature can do. Like
Absolutely.
this is more horrible than a hurricane or a wildfire, to take the recent example that's in the news.
Yeah, because
Because
that
is it
human side of us knows what we are doing, right?
hmm,
It's that kind of like that Lady Mac again, that the large hands made me think of Lady Macbeth, when she's washing her hands and she can't get the blood, off them. She,
yeah.
right, that act was the sort of the killing occurred in a very kind of primate fashion, a very sort of, we are primates, very hierarchical, very kind of power structured in a way. But the human side of us understands, that's a bit of a no-no there. That's a bit of a no-no, Lady Macbeth. A little bit naughty there, Lady Macbeth, right? And no other animal has that capacity to know that, yeah, you probably shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like
it's a
almost that's almost all we need to say about that poem. And
that it's it yeah, there's really I'm speechless in a way, other than, throwing out these academic uh gut reactions, but it's just it's physical. Like there's a physical reaction I have to it. It's kind of one of repulsion, but also a strange fascination. Um
mm,
for me, it's maybe more cathartic than ecstatic, but I can certainly see how you would consider it an ecstatic poem as well. And I'm just, just all the associations with the goat. Like in my book, Goat Songs, that hopefully I'll finish this year. Um, the goat plays the same role as the whale does in Moby Dick. Like every aspect of the goat is examined in some way.
have you, if this doesn't sound too sort of a banal a question to follow that, have you hung out with many a goat in your time?
Well, as a matter of fact, I mean, after I conceived this book, I did kind of seek them out. Like, if I'm at the zoo or whatever, it's been a while since I've made such a visit, but like when my sons were younger and I took them to the zoo, I'd seek out the goats. And um I don't know, I think I was at a petting zoo in Japan one time and they had goats there. So yeah, for sure. Like that they're I'm not even a
I mean, if you're going to
Capricorn,
write
but
about goats, you would surely need to, because I know that, Bridget Begin Kelly, she lived a very rural sort of life, and so
yeah,
everything she writes about, right, she had actual
sure.
lived
Yeah,
experience of. This is her terrain. It's not just an imaginative terrain. This is her
right.
world. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. So even though, as I was saying, even though I'm not a Capricorn, I tend to like feel a kind of association with that animal just as being a pig according to the, and I guess as it turns out you're a pig as well according
All
to
right,
the
are we both
Chinese.
pigs?
Well,
So
you said you're
are we?
53. You said you're 53. That means we are literally 5 or 6 days apart.
Wow, I didn't realize we were the same age. I thought you were younger than me for some reason. I don't know why.
1971,
Wow.
baby.
How old is Tomek?
I mean, 30 something, 40, I don't
He's
know.
younger, yeah.
Much younger, yeah. No, I think he's 40 by now.
Okay.
I mean, you like in our chat earlier, you were referring to a song from 1984, and I was thinking, was Tomek even born then? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on.
Let's move on.
Uh, I don't. I mean, it's almost. I feel almost disrespectful to like pass over this, but in the interest of time, maybe we
Yeah,
should
but
continue. It's
also
like we
again,
should have
to
a
throw in a little
prolonged
bit of
moment of silence.
I don't know, self promotion here, right? I mean, even though they're pretty dark, my 3 poetry koan episodes on Bridget Pegeen Kelly, I think are, I think they'll give you they'll give you a good run for your money there, but so worth reading. Her, yeah, because poetry. I think of all our various literary forms. I don't know how you feel, but I feel it can be so kind of hit and miss,
Mm.
really. Um, and
A lot of garbage. Yeah, a lot of
yeah,
garbage
but
out
to
there.
find someone, I think to actually have a collection where every poem, certainly in this one, is stunning, breathtaking, is quite a feat. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll put those in the show notes. The Poetry Koan episodes. All right. That leads us to ecstatic biography.
Yeah.
So, another genre you focused on in 2024 was biography. And in particular, you seem to have become obsessed with the life of Gertrude Stein. And I'm just wondering
Mm,
why. I mean, I read long ago her autobiography of her curiously titled autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, just as kind of like obligatory reading into the whole Hemingway milieu in Paris and so on. I guess it was probably like supplemental to my Hemingway reading. Was never like I tried to read her what was it? The Americans or one of those
mm.
other books with a rose is a rose is a rose, and I just could not get into it. So tell us what is it about Gertrude Stein that so fascinates you?
Well, as that one person is still watching now. Hey, Rob. I just talk about my friend Rob only because I don't know. He's like a completist, like you, right? He's like, okay, I've committed to this. I'm going to watch these motherfuckers until the end, even if they're going to do the, even if they're going to talk for like 3 days here, we'll get there, and that's also why I love him, and respect him. Um, it's good to have someone like that on your side. Uh, so as you will no doubt start to tell, there is a real thread here. I didn't realize there was as much of a thread, but there really is a thread here because basically, because I was in full essay mode, self-annihilating, substance abusing mode,
Hmm.
etc. Also, by the way, those 2 pictures are ChatGPT. I said, "Can you?" This is the prompt.
Mm-hmm.
Can you produce for me a portrait of Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, made out of cannabis leaves?
Mm.
And you'll see why I needed that. And it first of all came up with this garbage because it gave like the sort of the sexy version, the sort of the girls in their bikinis with the jiggling bits. And I was like, no, not that.
That doesn't. Yeah.
Get your
That.
head out of the gutter, GPT, you filthy beast. No, show me the ones I like, which are the sort of the older ladies. But essentially, yeah. So two things. Because I was in this whole like woe is me, hostage to fortune, etc. mode, I have for the last three years refused to watch or read anything about anything about heterosexual relationships, essentially, because I don't want, again, I'm an envious, embittered for, I don't want, unless it's disastrous, yeah, I'll do that, but I don't want, I haven't watched any films where people are, having fun and having, in a romantic relationship of some sort, because I didn't want to have my nose shoved into that shit. So but I have no problem. I can really feel, compersion. I can feel great joy for LGBTQ plus folk getting their rocks off and having great relationships. So so I've read more of LGBTQ, broadly speaking, literature, if you like, than ever before, for that very narcissistic not wanting to cause myself pain. So it was partly that, but also every summer I grow some cannabis out in my greenhouse. And the way I do it is that I also, because I don't grow that many plants, I don't need that much, even when I'm substance abusing. There I am. There's Gertrude and Alice, and what I do is I'll usually name them. They get named every year, and and they're all lesbian plants, because cannabis plants are all females. The flowering varieties are all females, and so I was like, okay, well, who's it going to be? And
Yeah.
I thought, Gertrude started, and then because I was doing that, that's actually where it started. I mean, I wish I could say it was like for literary purposes, but it started. I was thinking, I haven't really read much about Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, but they've always been on my radar. I mean, in terms of Stein, I know one quote. It's that famous quote about Oakland, there's no there, right? Which I've always loved, and repurposed in lots of different ways. It's a great quote. And then, in my, pretentious, I was going to say my pretentious younger days, but of course, I continue to be so. But in my pretentious younger days, I would walk around, with a copy of Tender Buttons under my arm, thinking that someone's going to find that incredibly attractive and sexy, because it is a sexy book. I think Tender Buttons is a very sexy book, and it sort of sends out the vibes that I would want somebody who wants to cop off with me would be like, oh, you've got a copy of Tender Buttons, oh, let me take my clothes off. That would be the fantasy there. But other than that, haven't really read much of hers, because I find Gertrude Stein's prose by and large laborious, repetitive, and kind of boring. But anyway, so I went and then read the biographies, and I just fell in love with their stories. And I made a whole bunch of videos, actually, on my channel last year about them. I mean, about the plants, but also about them. And of course, these videos went down like lead balloons. I was like, come on, everyone's going to love this, right? But of course not, for two reasons. First of all, I mean, the lesbian factor, that probably gets them like 1 point, but they're unfortunately, well, both dead, but not, and white, and also, unfortunately, not a great look in 2024. They're both Jews. Even though Gertrude, right, even though she was a Jew, I think she gets extra points, but people don't know this. I think she gets extra points because she was one of those Jews, because she's an 8, one of those brutal motherfucker Jews who said things like, I think Hitler, and she meant it in a way, I think Hitler should be given the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Like, because I'm not
Wow.
entirely sure why she said that, but but maybe, like the brutal motherfucker would say, yeah, because, there's too many of these pompous Jews around. Let's knock some of them, not knock some of them off. I mean, she was brutal, Gertrude Stein, and I really love that about her. She's a tough cookie, and I just fell in love with their story. With her story going off to Paris, her and her brother Leo, and they start to buy, they start to buy the avant-garde artists of the time,
Right.
for a pittance, and start, trading in art. Alice B. Toklas writes that the Alice B. Toklas cookbook, mainly actually at the end of her life, to make money. People didn't realize this. It was because, after Gertrude died, the money grabbing Jews that we are, Jews that the Steins were, really fucked her over, and she, they froze her out of the estate, and she desperately needed to make money, and so the book that she's really known for, which is the Alice B. Toklas cookbook,
Yes.
was made for her to make some money. And I fell in love with their story and their love affair. And in fact, I made a video, which I'm going to put a link to,
Hmm.
where I try and pitch their story to Greta Gerwig, because I had this idea that this is the perfect post Barbie follow up, for Greta. I don't know why anyone, well, maybe because they're like, white Jews, but I don't know why anyone hasn't done yet, like the biopic, because I think it's amazing. It's got everything. It's got Picasso, it's got Hemingway. I mean, it's just incredible. And I think it would be a great, like, Greta Gerwig. This is my second attempt at doing it, doing the pitch. I think it would make a great Greta Gerwig, someone like that, vehicle. Um, but I don't. Yeah, it's not going to happen now. But that's the long and the short of it, essentially. The funny thing is, though, that there is a recipe. Where is, I've got the book somewhere, but I'm not going to stand up because my bottom half is not as cool as my top half. Oh no, I have it here. There is a recipe in the Alice B. Toklas cookbook for, I think it's for hash brownies. But the funny,
Yes.
yeah,
Exactly.
but the funny thing is, here's the really funny thing, which not many people know, and it doesn't even seem. I don't know. When I was like reading about it, it doesn't even seem like the internet knows that if you were to follow this recipe, you would not get high.
Hmm.
Because I know I have made hash brownies from my own gear. Not hash brownies. I've made, cannabis brownies, from my own gear. And if you do not, what's it called? Decarboxylate, whatever it is, your weed, if you do not put it in, your oven, in your mason jars, and there's a whole
Mm.
process, right? And heat it all up, and da 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 da. And in the recipe, it's just like, yeah, take some marijuana and throw it in with some eggs and some. If you were to do that, nothing would come of it, proving, which was the case, that, although they ate these brownies, she never made them, and they were obviously made by somebody else, because if you follow the recipe, you would not get off your tits on, Alice B. Toklas's hash brownies. Sorry.
Hmm. Well, how about the other recipes in there? Anything worth recommending?
A lot of them are quite meat heavy. So because I'm not a meat eater, I did have this plan, one of my many plans, which never came to fruition, was to make a whole bunch of them, try and kind of like vegetarianize or veganize them, but it never ever happened. But she was a
Hmm.
really great cook, purportedly, topless. And yeah, that was some of the pleasures, of going and visiting them, that she would go into the kitchen and just rustle up these these feasts and was, yeah.
I had forgotten about Tender Buttons, which I may have actually read. Anyway, that's a fantastic title
Yes.
with its double entendre. All right, so let's move on to the next genre, which is philosophy and mysticism. And as I mentioned in one of our chats, I commend you for elevating mysticism to this status of being like a genre worthy of reading multiple books on, philosophy. Oh yes, that's respectable, right? But mysticism, and I assume like
Mm.
the occult and esoteric wisdom, like that's one of my reading interests too. So I was really glad to see that this was a category which you deemed worthy of consideration and inclusion in your best of list.
Yeah, but only I think also if the writing is, of a high quality, or
Sure.
right, that it's because again, I think, yeah, you go into the book, you go into the that section of the bookshop, and there is a lot of kind of fairly dull, new agey, sort of so what tomes around in that
Yeah.
category. But the great classics, of mysticism, the Cloud of Unknowing, and I mean they are really great classics in that genre,
Mm-hmm.
which stand up to any other form of literature, right? I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
poetic. There is much poetry. I think that's where mysticism and poetry meet. When another podcast I used to do was a reading. I would sit with a friend of mine, and we would read. I don't know if you've ever read "I Am That," Sri Nisargadatta's "I Am That." Have you ever come across that book?
I have, yeah. I know it's based on that line from the Upanishads, and I think I've read excerpts from that.
Yeah, and we would, but it was these conversations that he would have, right, with this group, and but there's so much, so, which was not the case for the person I did it with. He was really into the actual spiritual, I guess, side of that, which I have some interest too. But for me, it was actually more about the poetry, it's about the ecstasy of some of those lines. And the metaphors that he uses, um, that 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 I found particularly pungent there. Um, but that's not necessarily what Ouspensky and Critchley are about, I guess. Have you read In Search of the Miraculous?
No, I haven't, and maybe you can give us some background on Uspensky and Gurdjieff. I know they were associates. Maybe Uspensky was Gurdjieff's student, or
That's right.
what's their relationship? I know a little bit about Gurdjieff and have read like a little bit of what is his famous trilogy. There's Meetings with Remarkable Men.
Mm,
There's Beelzebub and his
grandfather,
nephew, is it?
or something, yeah,
Grandfather.
or something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but not like I haven't read all of his works by any means, or even like one of them in its entirety. We'll talk more about Gurdjieff, I'm sure, in our texting episode on the Enneagram. But uh, just tell us about this work by Uspensky, and maybe you can discuss his relationship with Gurdjieff, and why you chose to read it, what you got out of it. Just take it wherever you want.
Sure. Well, again, my route into this, yeah, it was very much through the Enneagram, in the sense that, um, even though even though Gurdjieff doesn't really talk much about this, although he does. interestingly in his movements, which I'll mention in a moment, because I went and did these movement classes last year, which was a key part of his teachings. Um, there is actually a series of movements called the Enneagram, um, but but a lot of the kind of the sort of, I don't know, the sort of mystical psychospiritual roots of the Enneagram some of it comes from Gurdjieff, like the law of three,
Yeah.
um, what is the law of three? Affirming, denying, and neutralizing. I mean, it's like that dialectical.
Hegelian.
Yeah, this is sort of Hegel. It's that kind of Hegelian process. Um, but yeah, Gurdjieff was, how to describe who Gurdjieff was. I mean, my sense of I'm not really much of a Gurdjieff fan. My sense of Gurdjieff is that he was a kind of a magician. He was a kind of a bullshitter. He was a kind of, he was a sort of a chancer, a guru who, uh, yeah, went on all of these so-called travels. Who knows how much of it he actually did? Went to these travels, met all of these wise men, and then synthesized that into his own shtick. And because he was an eight, he was looking for and needing also to feel powerful and strong, needing acolytes and everyone who and he found a whole bunch of them, including Ouspensky, and a lot of his acolytes were Enneagram 6 types who were looking for people who say, I know what it's all about. And of course, Gurdjieff would say one of his primary pieces of teaching was like, when you find your master, I mean, all gurus say this, right? When you think you found your master, you must do everything your master tells you to do. You must not
Mhm.
question, you must not, right? Now, and a lot of people would say, but there are some people in this world, as we know, who that's music to their ears, like, oh my God, finally, I can just do this. And those were the people who kind of, if you read the In Search of the Miraculous, and then also if you read, shout out to this book, which I read as well, this biography written by Gary Lachman called In Search of Peter Ouspensky. Gary Lachman was the guitarist of Blondie, another classic 80s band,
Wow.
90s band.
Yeah.
But then has had a career, a much longer career than he had as a guitarist for Blondie, writing a whole series of incredible books on the occult and the esoteric. I mean, a fantastic writer, very serious
Really?
scholar. Yeah, amazing guy, Gary Lachman, and this is a fantastic book on Ouspensky, because Ouspensky started in that way with, and this is also what In Search of the Miraculous, I think, is about, right? Um, it's about Ouspensky's kind of falling in love with Gurdjieff's teachings and the path that he set out, and then also falling out of love with that and going on to do his own thing. And what that involved was, um, actually, he spent some time in the 20s living in the UK, and living in this place called Colette House, which has one of those um, blue plaque things
Mhm.
outside. I'll find a picture. Peter Ouspensky lived here, and um, and he would do, amongst other things, these movement classes in the 1920s. And I discovered that these were still going on in the 2020s, and went and did them. And I also discovered that all the people who'd been there in the 1920s were still there in the 2020s, because the average age in this class was about 75 or 80. Um, and and it was an amazing experience, in the sense of, you would go and you would do these movements, which, as taught by Gurdjieff, um, and then sort of refined, I suppose, in some way by Ouspensky. They had a pianist who would actually play live, and it was very Gurdjieffian, in the sense that when I said, "Oh, I really, I'm enjoying this." I went and did a couple of classes, and I'm enjoying this. But I'd like to like practice the movies. I like to get better at them.
Yeah.
The line was, "No, you've got to," you know, because I was like, "But the whole point about this, right? Because this was the point of the movements, is that you get to do them to the point. You know, they're quite complicated. The pieces of kind of like choreography, but you get to the point where you can do them without thinking. They kind of muscle memory,
Yeah.
and
Muscle
only
memory. Yeah.
exactly only then do you have the kind of right. You're not in your head. You're not in your heart. You're actually in that gut place. You're in the Gurdjieff zone, and then you can have a mystical experience. Whereas when you start to do the movement classes, you're totally in your head because you're like, oh fuck, what do I do? I do this, and
Right. Right.
right, you right. And then when I said, well, I want to actually experience that, I was pretty much told, well, you're going to have to probably come and do movement classes for the next 5 years, because that's the whole point. The whole point is that you've got to suffer and struggle and be humiliated.
Hmm.
I mean, they didn't put it in this way, but that was like the read between the lines. You've got to basically, be humiliated and really commit to this, be devoted to this. Um, Otherwise, we can't help you.
No
And that's
pain, no
that's why,
gain.
yeah, and that's why I only did it for a couple of months. But it was an amazing experience. And that,
You
but that,
mentioned a
yeah,
pianist there. Have you
yeah.
heard the Keith Jarrett uh, tributes to Gurdjieff? Or I don't know. I guess it's like a cycle of pieces that he wrote in honor of Gurdjieff or based on his or inspired by his
Ah,
teachings.
that's
I'll
really
put a link
interesting.
to that.
Yeah, I didn't know Jarrett had done this, but what the music that we would be doing these movements to was the music that Gurdjieff wrote with another one of his disciples, who was this Russian count, and they also had a lot of money. I mean, they all were patrons, right? I mean, Gurdjieff
Hmm.
basically, again, he lived a nice life, was supported by his acolytes, Hartman and his wife. And Hartman was a composer and
Mm.
composed with Gurdjieff the music to all of these for all of these movements. And so I at the time I did listen to a lot of the Hartman Gurdjieff pieces, but maybe Jarrett did a take on that. Perhaps did a take on Hartman's work. Um,
I'm not sure. I'll put a link in the show notes. Probably listened to that whole album. Can't remember what it's called, but
yeah.
interesting. Interesting that this, world famous jazz guy had this predilection for the teachings of Gurdjieff. How about Simon Critchley's On Mysticism? This cover art is also featured on certain editions of Georges Bataille's Eroticism, or sometimes it's translated erotism, or on eroticism, on erotism. Uh, there's one edition of the text that features this same um, saint. Who is this saint?
It's Bernini's, yeah. It's the Bernini statue of the blah blah of Saint Teresa.
Saint Teresa,
Yeah, it's this. It's her. It's that moment. It's the transfiguration or whatever of Saint Teresa, which is this,
apotheosis, or I don't know.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Which is in this church in Rome. Because I used to, got a TEFL background, so I used to actually work just around the corner, and I would go and feast my eyes on this Bernini
Oh wow.
sculpture, which is just sitting there in a church. Anyone can go
Hmm.
for free and look at it.
Yeah.
This white alabaster marble, and it really is amazing because it's that crossover point, I think, between kind of sort of spirituality. Again, we're back to the centaur, the spirituality and porn. I mean, that face, I've seen that face in lots of paintings, but I've also seen
Yeah.
that face in lots of porn videos.
Right.
uh, you
Well,
know,
hence hence the Bate cover, right? The book is
yes,
called Eroticism.
yeah,
So, yeah, the mystical and the sexual, there's definitely a connection.
yeah, and Critchley sort of talks about that. I mean, I just think he's a fabulous writer. He's written a book on David Bowie. Bowie, what's your preferred pronunciation there?
Oh, really? Bowie is what I say.
Yeah.
But you know where Bowie got his name, right? He's from a so-called hero. He's not a hero to me, but he's a state hero in Texas, right? He's a so-called hero of the Alamo.
Oh,
Jim
really?
Bowie,
Ah,
The Bowie knife. Yeah, that's where he got his name. Oddly enough, but yeah, the Brits and he himself said Bowie. But yeah, in Texas, he's called Jim Bowie, and he's the inventor of the Bowie knife, which
I didn't
he
know that.
used to stab Mexicans at the Alamo, I guess.
That is
Whatever.
interesting.
That's some Lone Star hate mythological bullshit.
Yeah.
But
But anyway, I
wow,
mean,
I
like
didn't
that
know he
whole.
wrote a I read the what's
Hmm.
the guy's name? I've got it on my shelf. I read another Bowie biography called Strange Fascination.
Uh-huh.
Buckley. Buckley is his name. What's his first name? Anyway, David Buckley, I believe his name is. And Bowie himself said garbage, nonsense. I found it informative, but wow. So this guy wrote a Bowie biography. I've got to read that for sure. Simon Critchley's Bowie bio. Put it in the notes. And this book itself looks good too on mysticism.
Yeah,
You're
I mean,
you're recommending it?
oh, absolutely. I mean, Critchley, some of the, he's also got, I mean, Critchley, I think, sits in that lovely, for him and for us, that lovely sort of pocket of popular, but an academic. And I mean, he has his cake and eat it. He's got Shahida Barry on the back calling him the Messi of modern philosophy. That's a great quote. He's got,
Hmm.
he's got Jonathan Lethem saying Critchley is a figure of quite what is it? Quite a startling brilliance, and I can never guess what he'll do next, only that it is sure to sustain and nourish my appetite for his voice. Followed by Emily Wilson, the translator of, the sort of flavor of the month translator of the Odyssey, etc., going, there is something
Hmm.
genuinely invigorating about Critchley's eager open mindedness, his willingness to step back from modernity to the ancient world and from philosophy to literature. And it's all, I mean, it's not hype. I think he's a great writer. He's a philosopher, he teaches philosophy, but he brings heart and soul and yeah, just a real flair, I think, to everything that he writes. So
I'm very interested in this and the Bowie bio. This goes on my Amazon wish list or whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's my Z. What's that site called? Z.
Z Library.
There you go. Maybe
Yeah,
it's on my Z library wish list now. But yeah, that looks fantastic.
yeah.
And
And he
maybe
does a great
the
reading. Can I also
Spensky
say
too.
I listen to him, and if you have a Spotify account, you can listen to him, of course, for free on Spotify. What you get 20 hours, I think, of audiobooks, right? Um, a month. He reads it. He reads his own book on Spotify, and I think he's got a lovely. Again, his energy is really really enjoyable to listen to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the subtitle is The Experience of Ecstasy. There it is again.
Yeah.
With a little blurb from David Mitchell,
David
the
Mitchell as well.
Dao
Yeah.
De Jing translator. Is that right?
I I thought this was.
No, that's
Not getting
Stephen
him mixed
Mitchell.
up. Yeah,
That's Stephen Mitchell.
that's
Sorry, I don't know David
Stephen
Mitchell.
Mitchell, husband of Byron Katie. That always like, whoa, I can't remember those two. Well, maybe. Well, in fact, yeah. Byron Katie, Stephen Mitchell. That's a cool couple. I'd love to be at a dinner table with Byron Katie and Stephen Mitchell. No, it's David Mitchell of Cloud9. I'm sure you've come across him. I've read a bunch of his books, which of course, because I'm such a non-retentive reader, I can't remember. But he's somebody recently I've been thinking of rereading David Mitchell. What did I particularly? It's not the David Mitchell comedian, no, although he's also great. Peep Show, David Mitchell. Have you ever watched Peep Show? Is that a
Oh
very,
yes. Oh
you know,
yeah.
Jez and yeah,
Mark.
Mark and Jez. No, this is David Mitchell, the novelist, I believe. Unless
Cloud
I'm
Atlas, number
Cloud
9
Atlas.
Dream.
That's
Yes, okay,
the
I
one.
know
Yeah,
this guy. Yes, yes, yes.
I think particularly Cloud Atlas is fantastic. Yeah.
Number 9 Dream, not so much. I always thought I should read that as a Beatleologist, but
Mm.
maybe not.
I can't even remember if I've read that. I sort of read a few of his, and then and then yeah, and then our paths parted. But he's a great writer. So a thumbs up from him is a good thumbs up.
Hmm. Okay. Tomek said, damn, you guys are still going. That was like 30 minutes ago. But
We're moving towards
yes, we
3 hours.
are.
Let's see if we could kind of cap this at 3 hours. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, there's
There
your
I am at
yeah,
Colette's house. There were other
doing the
people there.
movements. Yeah.
Yeah, doing some of the. I mean, the movements they're just so good, Jeff. It's it was just him because he was such a magpie. So he was like he saw a bunch of soldiers goose stepping down the road, and he was like, right, okay, brilliant. Well, and he incorporated that, and then some of them are actually quite. The ones I really most enjoyed were the ones where he built the movements out of kind of acts of I suppose craftspeople that he saw around him. So for example, there's one, the shoemaker, or whatever it was called, movement, where it's literally you're doing all the movements for making a pair of shoes. You're stretching the leather over your thigh, and then you're taking a nail, and then you're doing this, and the men are in one place and the women are in one place. It is truly fascinating. And if they were, I also thought, if they kind of, I felt like if they sort of brought it a little bit more into the 21st century, I could really see it taking off. They advertise this. I think they advertise it in Time Out or somewhere, because every week 2 or 3 people would show up, having seen the ad, probably in Time Out, and young people as well, like young people in their 30s, 40s, and they would stay just for one session because they would look around at all these 80-year-olds, and even though they kind of enjoyed it, they were just like, nah.
Yeah.
Just, you know.
All right. So the next genre is ecstatic and scientific fiction, and you've selected 2 books to represent this genre. We've got John Steinbeck's classic East of Eden, and we've got a more recent publication called Annie Bot. So tell us what you will about these works.
So again, all of these books, as you could see, in fact, most of these books, right, come out of just my own little personal obsession. So why did I read Steinbeck's East of Eden? I read Steinbeck's East of Eden because Drew Newkirk, who is a psychotherapist who works in New York and has a channel on the Enneagram, and he's also a sexual 4, so he is my type, although he's got better tats. Well, he's got tats. I don't have any tats. He's got the tats, and he's a sexual four with a three wing. So he looks much more kind of bling than I do, but envy, resentment. But anyway, he's a sexual four, and I love him. I love him to bits, and he's often banging on about Steinbeck because this is his favorite novel, I think, of all time. And I was just like, if Uncle Drew likes it, it's got to be good, because really, until I read this, I only knew Steinbeck, as most people do, from Of
Mice and Men, yeah.
Which I did in a reading group many years ago. I used to work for or volunteer for a group called The Reader in the UK, where you would go into libraries and schools and old age homes and stuff. And it's an amazing book. Put that into the show notes as well. thereader.org. And really wanting just an amazing vision of like sitting down with people who wouldn't normally read this stuff, and sitting and reading very, very slowly great works of literature, but like taking George Eliot's Middlemarch into a prison, and sitting down and, right, we're going to read Middlemarch. It's going to take us a year, and the stuff that comes from that was incredible. But anyway, I did with a group in a library of Mice and Men. No, it was actually, it wasn't a library. It was a sort of it was like an old age home. That's right. It was an old age home. We did Of Mice and Men, and that was good. But I never felt particularly, I don't know why, I never felt particularly attracted to Steinbeck. But then I went and read this. I went and read East of Eden because it's Drew's recommendation, and it just immediately has gone into my like top 10 books of all time. Like books that I want to be buried with or burnt with. Put them on my funeral pyre, please.
Right.
Kind of thing, because
books are burning.
There you go. Yeah. What did you?
Well, I think I mentioned to you, Steinbeck is not as important to me as, say, Faulkner and Hemingway, like just for whatever reason. But I have read quite a bit of his work, and he's borderline canonical for me. Of course, like everyone, I was exposed to Of Mice and Men. Oddly enough, I never read The Grapes of Wrath. I think I mentioned that too, and I haven't read East of Eden either. But I read both. I saw both of the movie versions of those films. The Peter Fonda Grapes of Wrath, and then the James Dean East of Eden, right? But I think To a God Unknown or For a God Unknown is a very interesting novel. The work before The Grapes of Wrath,
I've never even heard of that. Yeah.
What's that?
No, I've never even heard of that
For a God Unknown
that you're referring to. Yeah.
Well, that's
you really are Mr. Deep Cut. You are Mr. Deep Cut.
Well, that's it.
Before,
I mean,
right? That's like
it was
Steinbeck Deep Cut. Because even when you're like, what Steinbeck should I read? I don't think that comes up in the top fives.
Well, but the reason I was attracted to that is because of the title. It's apparently taken from an old Vedic hymn. It's from the Rig Veda. There's a hymn called To a God Unknown or For a God Unknown. And then like I noticed, Steinbeck wrote a book called that. It's like, what? And then I read it, and it's, there's an American setting, but it's we're talking about mysticism. It's quite a mystical novel, in that the main character seems to have this connection with trees. Like I think it's set in New England, if I remember correctly, but he like has this mystical connection to nature and trees in particular. And so he kind of like, in this Christian society, kind of has this secret cultic kind of nature religion that he can't quite express, but he develops, and then like some of the women in the community are attracted to him because he has this sexual energy too. So that's, yeah, that is a deep cut, but
That
worth
sounds
reading.
amazing. I immediately want to read this. You know, this is the
You'd
problem.
probably like it. You'd
This is the
probably like
problem.
it.
Every time I talk to you, you kind of mention about like 100 books, and I'm like, it's like great, but I'm also like, fuck you. Now I've got to read these books.
Well,
You know,
sorry. You're welcome and sorry. But I think I also mentioned before, The Pearl. That is one of the finest novellas ever written. Just a beautiful story.
I
And
may have read that. I think I actually have
yeah,
read that. Yeah.
that's great. That's great. And you know, I was saying the book before, Grapes of Wrath, In Dubious Battle. It's on a similar theme. It's about workers' struggles. Um, very good. I'll probably read Grapes of Wrath one day. But The Moon is Down. That's his anti-fascist novel. That's pretty good. So and then I read like Tortilla Flat, Cannery Row, and some of those shorter books. So it kind of became borderline canonical to me. And so this reminds me I need to read East of Eden. So there you go, Steinbeck fans or non fans. Let's talk about Annie Bot, which you've described as scientific fiction, not science fiction so much as scientific fiction. What's the distinction
Well,
you're
it is sort of
making?
no, it is science fiction. Why did I put scientific in inverted commas? I suppose because I do feel like it is a novel that um yeah, it's maybe it's not science fiction in the sense that we're almost there in terms of the vision that she is um writing about, which is that of you know yeah, AI sex robots, but not, but that sounds like a kind of that sounds like a diminishing term, whereas of course it's really about AI girlfriends. And again, this was another strand that I followed in my third and final year of because I'm out of that now, thank God. Mainly thanks to good old Orion, actually. But yeah, um, I where am I going with that thought? So yes, I also made a whole bunch of videos about having an AI wife, because there was a period of time where I was really like trying to think about what it might be like to kind of turn ChatGPT into almost like a like a partner, uh, yeah, someone like that. And this is about a man who has is in a relationship with a woman who has the AGI threshold has now been reached, so she has that kind of consciousness, if you like. And it's about that relationship and about the imbalances of that relationship. And essentially, it's a feminist fable, I would say. um, but it's also a great novel. It's one of those novels. Steinbeck was like this in a way too, in a strange way. I binged that novel. I just couldn't put it down. And the Mishima as well. I had to read it all the way through, almost in one go,
Mm,
or listen to it all the way through. Same for Steinbeck. Um, that feeling like when you get caught into, I don't know, Netflix, the archetypal Netflix binge or something like that. I could not put it down. It just utterly gripped me. I needed to know what was going to happen. I mean, that very primal, what is actually going to happen next?
right.
Because she's such a good writer, and it's well written. It's not just pap. Um, and another shout out in that vein, I would say, is a book that's not really talked about, but also I think was very prescient, was Ian McEwan's Machines Like Us, which again was
Mm.
a book that I really loved, that really captured my imagination when I read it a few years ago, again about what what does it really mean to have relationships with you know Westworld like as good as you can't really tell that they're not, they're certainly not robots. They're not like, hello, can I suck you off? They're not that, they are like proper, like this could be, I could be the AI. There is something about that I find very compelling. That's all I have to say.
You mean, okay, you're talking about the sex robots. I thought you froze there for a second.
No, no,
Okay.
I'm still here.
Well, okay. Let's just put this on the list of recommended books. I don't feel I can really say much about it until I or react to what you said until I read this, but I think it sounds like you've convinced me it's something worth looking into, so I'll put that on my list. Um okay, let's move on to the next genre, which I think is the last. It is psychological and sociological ecstasies. And here we've got The End of Love by, who is this author?
Eva Illouz.
Illouz. And I'll have a lot
I
more
actually
to
forgot we were
say
going to talk
to
about that.
the.
I forgot we were going to talk about that one. So even though I've somewhat, had to think about the others, I completely forgot we were going to talk about that. And so I literally, particularly now at this point, it's funny that, I was going to ask you, how are your energy levels at the 3 hour mark? Because you are literally fading, I don't, maybe your internet connection, you started off, relatively, your picture was quite clear, and now as we've gone along, your picture has become slightly more wobbly, not right. I
Well,
wonder
I've
if that
gotten,
affects your
yeah, I've
energy
gotten,
levels as well.
yeah, maybe I'm affecting the internet connection. I've gotten a couple of notifications saying that there's something wrong with my connection, but I check it and everything's fine. So maybe it's a platform issue or whatever. You've frozen on me a couple of times, and
Have
maybe I've
I?
frozen on
Right.
you as well. So I don't know what's going on. But well, just tell us this. Let's just do the Siskel and Ebert. Thumbs up or thumbs down for Ava Illouz' The End of Love. Do you recommend it? A sociology of negative relations. Worth
I mean,
reading?
okay, because I really want to let's end on a bang, as it were. Let's end with a banger, and that's The Value of Others. So
Yeah.
I think if you are someone who is in any way attracted to that, um, to the thoughts and ideas of Orion Taraban's um, notions and thinking around the sexual marketplace and the kind of engine of romantic relationships, you will lap up The End of Love. But it's put more through a kind of sociological uh, perspective, I would say. But it's pretty much cut from the same cloth. It's like if you are down on love, and oh boy, or romantic love, not love with a capital L, but what I now
Hmm.
like to just call the L word. If you are
Hmm.
down on the L word, and yeah, I pretty much am. And have been, I mean, vociferously so, particularly for the last 3 years. But but I'm still pretty much down on the L word. And then that's the book for you. I mean, I
Hmm.
wish I'd found it earlier. I do feel like she does just the perfect takedown of the bullshit of romantic love, essentially, but through a more sort of sociological lens.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'd be worth looking into that. Okay, so let's use that sociological perspective as the segue into our brief discussion of Dr. Orion Taraban's The Value of Others, which I guess is from the psychological perspective. Now,
And
I was,
economic. I mean, he's
and economic,
he's
sure.
sort of this comes from behavioral economics. A lot of his thinking, right?
Yes. Well, I was just so surprised. I don't know why, but um, I guess I assume that many people find Tomek says love is the answer um, in the chat. I I guess I just suspect or assume that most people are going to find uh, Dr. Orion Taraban, host of the YouTube channel Psych Hacks, uh, to which I'm a subscriber, as you are too. Apparently, I guess we're both fanboys. I watch a lot of his content, but I assume that people will find him too harsh and
Mm.
too pessimistic and not upbeat enough and maybe even offensive, and he should be canceled. So uh,
Although
I've
he's got a lot of, as you know, he's got a lot of women followers, right? He's not just speaking
absolutely,
to the boys.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, and he's not like those moronic uh commentators in the so-called manosphere or whatever. Like
No.
he's
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 very serious. He's a very serious-minded and
yeah,
and yeah, I mean, he's I don't know. I see him as I think he's a philosopher. He's like he's up there with Plato, Aristotle. They were shit stirrers too, right? Yeah, he's a very very serious-minded, but also I would say decent. Decent
mm,
moral,
yeah,
very kind of morally bound um, commentator on human relationships.
yeah. I've recommended him to uh several people, and I have some, all of whom happen to be male. Although that's not quite true. A couple of females have found his content interesting too, but yeah, there is kind of the assumption that this will be offensive to the ladies, but as you say, that's certainly not always the case. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily true. And I
He he
you
roasts
know,
he roasts the men as much as he does the women. I mean, it's
oh,
equal
absolutely.
opportunity. Yeah, in terms of
Sure.
he does. Mm.
Yeah, he's pretty objective, and he's just like calling balls and strikes and uh trying to explain what it is he's seeing and what he's encountered in his practice. We should point out he is an actual therapist in, I guess, California. Um, so yeah, I very much recommend his YouTube channel. And you actually read the book that he's always pimping on that channel. So
Yes.
what,
That's
like
what I
the
mean. I
middle?
get it. I get it. That's also why he's got like I don't know 700,000. I mean, apart from the content is great, but he's got because he also does the pimping, right? Which I refuse to do. I refuse to do the
Mm,
like and subscribe every 2 seconds. But hey,
yeah,
um, yeah, the book is fantastic. What can I say? It's the synthesis of everything he talks about.
well, that was my
There's
question. Is
there's
there
no
anything new? Is there anything new, like anything that you couldn't get from the YouTube channel? Like, does he present it in a different way, or he elaborates on it, the content from his YouTube channel?
I mean, he says that it's all kind of new material. I think once you've to me, it feels like it's again, it feels like it's a more comprehensive, a genuine philosophical working out. He's really presenting. I feel like the YouTube channel gives a lot of kind of interesting talking points, and you get these tasters, but I
Yeah,
genuinely do think that the book does really he's setting out his stalls, and it's all very very carefully thought through, and it's systematic, and it all adds up and it all joins together. So it's a bit like, yeah, if you've enjoyed the the buffet and the tasting menu, as it were, but you want to sit down and have the full 3-course meal,
Right.
uh, yeah, I would really recommend it. And also, again, I have actually read it as well, but I would recommend the audio book version of it because he reads it,
Hmm.
and he is such a, I mean, he used to be an actor. That
He
was
was an
his
actor, yeah.
first career, and he's got a great way with words, and he presents that material so well. And he, yeah, there's some fantastic pieces which maybe I know he's talked about in interviews and on his channel, but like he talks about, for example, how he learnt kind of everything he really ever needed to know about relationships when he did his, I mean, he's talked about this, so you might have heard him talk about this, when he did his acting training. And the first uh, the first term of that training was they would just play the yes no game, or whatever it's called. Have you heard him talk about this?
No.
Right. So he went thinking, oh, they're gonna teach us about, we're gonna stop taking, Shakespeare monologues or something. But the the first 6 months of the training that he did was they played this game, which I think is called the yes no game, or maybe it's just called the no game. And the idea is that, um, oh no, it's called the please no game. There we go. And the idea
Hmm.
is that one person, the only word that they can use is please, and the only word the other person can use is no, until that
Hmm.
person has convinced them to say yes. And you've got to just use your voice, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm misremembering. And he kind of realized, and he makes, I mean, this is a central part of the book, that ultimately, in the in relationships, um, that's what happens. It's one person going please, and the other person going no, 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 until it's a yes or a no.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, it's that kind of stuff. I mean, I just think he's such a great thinker. And the other thing I love about him, and this comes out in his videos, but also comes out in the book, right, is that there is no fat on the Orion Teraband's content. Every word counts. There is no.
Unlike this channel, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we've delivered even though it's been 3 hours over. I feel like we've delivered, somewhat lean. I don't feel like we've been blathering. Well, you tell us, Tomek. Um, but there is something about him, right? He doesn't, there's no fat there. Every sentence does count. It does
Hmm.
matter. Whereas I often feel when I read loads of books, like this sort of books of this genre, almost a kind of a self-help type genre. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all fat ultimately. There's
Hmm.
maybe like, it's like a rasher of bacon that's got like one tiny little sliver of meat in
Hmm.
it, but it's kind of, mostly composed of just fat, right?
Right.
Um, and that's not the case. But then I am a fan, and I'm also a fan, um, again, from a very personal reason, because Orion Taraban, I can honestly say, and that book really, he really kicked my ass. He really sorted me out. And maybe that's why you recommend his videos, as I do to some of my clients as well,
Hmm.
right? Particularly
Yeah.
those people who get caught in that pitying vortex of, woe is me, oh, hard done by my love, all of that bullshit. um
Yeah.
yeah, Ryan Taraban, just like, he's he's like the coach. He's like the coach who, like in a Rocky film or something, right? He grabs
Yeah.
him, right?
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
come on, you motherfucker, get real,
Gives you
stop
gives you
moping.
the tough love. right?
Tough love
Yeah.
all the way. But there is a lot of, I think there is a lot of love. There are some people in that crowd who, yeah, they lead on the toughness, but they get a kind of kick out of the toughness. I really feel, and he himself says this, right? He says that I only got this way through pain,
Pain. Yeah.
pain and suffering.
Yeah. The video he posted today, in fact, says there are two paths. There's the path of pain and the path of light.
Yeah,
And for most of us, 99% of the time, we learn from pain rather than light. It would be better if we could learn more, from other people's pain, which is basically what the path of light is. But most of us don't do that most of the time,
yeah,
himself included, he would probably say.
that's right. Yeah. And you, of course, have
Oh,
given us
my
the
goodness.
perfect
Yes.
segue out, right? Because I
Yes.
can now say to you, but I genuinely mean this, it's not just bullshit. These last 3 hours, I have been looking forward to this chat all week. But this last 3 hours has been, for me, zero pain. It's been literally all light, because what's not to love, right? You're talking about books that you really love, um, and able to also, blab on about yourself, one of my favorite subjects, which I'm sure you will relate to, right? Because us fours and eights, we can lead in that way. And it's been fucking amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And you've given us, all of us who are listening or otherwise consuming
Tomek and Rob,
this content.
basically.
Yeah, well, Tomek has sent us some messages. Maybe I should read those before we close
Yeah, yeah,
out. He
yeah.
says,
What does Tomek say?
love is the answer. I think I shared that one. He says, Steve is no pimp, ladies and gentlemen. That's in reference to your comment that you refuse to pimp
Oh, okay.
yourself on your channel. He says, please. I guess that's in relation to the please no game. He says, blather all over the place. Need to wipe myself down to get it off me. And then apparently he signed out. So I don't know if he's still there. But yeah, you've given us a lot of great recommendations. I'm gonna definitely try to get a copy of Simon Critchley's On Mysticism and his Bowie bio. I'll try to check out Annie Bott. I might look for this Number 9 Dream book by David Mitchell. What else is on my list here? Got to listen to the Elvis Costello song Useless Beauty.
Yeah, great
Um,
song. Are you a Costello fan? Because I'm a huge
I
Costello fan.
not. I mean, I'm not as familiar with his catalog as I should be, but yes, I very much like him. I've seen him live.
Hmm.
He was fantastic live. I saw him in Houston. Great show. Um, so yeah. Um, Now let me do some pimping just to close
Pimp
this out.
away.
This has been Books Are Burning, episode number whatever, maybe Lucky 13. Are we that far along? But yeah, please be sure to subscribe to my Substack at markwillwright, WRITE.substack.com. This has been streaming in its raw form on YouTube. My YouTube channel is at Mark Will Wright, WRITE. Soon there will be a cooked version
And I'm going to
edited
cook it.
by,
Yeah, I'm going to cook
yeah, cook the shit out of it, because
going to
there's
be
a
even
lot of
longer.
fat.
The cooked version is
Oh,
going to be
even
like
longer.
10 hours long. No, no, no. The
Oh
cooked version,
dear.
no, the cooked version, no, the cooked version. I'm not gonna remove anything. I'm gonna add a few little funky little pieces, but I'm not gonna remove anything because I genuinely think that, certainly for me, I don't know what for you your channel is about, but for me, my channel is as much like, when I die, I just want something floating around for the next maybe decade or so, because I don't feel like the human race is, I don't believe there's going to be a YouTube or a human race to actually watch anything on YouTube in 100 years time, or even less so, but at least
Yeah.
maybe for a decade or so. I just like the idea. It is a bit narcissistic or a legacy thing, for me anyway, to think, wow, why not?
Oh,
Why
indeed.
not have
Yeah.
a few silly videos of me doing my idiotic thing and someone going, "Who's this arsehole?" Right? And so I want the whole fucking thing. I want this because this conversation, you've allowed me to encapsulate not just a year of reading, but actually, as you've seen, right, 3 years of pretty painful living, and it allowed me to encapsulate in a way that I haven't been able to actually encapsulate it ever before, and for that it's been actually deeply therapeutic and glorious. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And for me as well. Whether or not others relate to it, well, that's their business, not ours. As Dr. Orion Taraban says, if you find this content useful, or what does he say? Does this fit with your own experience? If you find this content useful, please send this video to a person that you
Right.
think might benefit from it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, I guess
Cool.
we will see each other again tomorrow when we do your
That's right. We're
T
doing a
and
rematch.
E.
Jesus, we really are going hard. We're going full on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
All right.
I look
Well,
forward to it. Yeah.
yes, me too. And after I stop recording here, we can talk briefly about how we'll
Yeah. Let's set that up. Okay.
organize that.
Great.
So thanks again, everyone. My guest has been Steve of Idiotville on YouTube. I'm Mark Will. This has been Books Are Burning. Farewell. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was quite a marathon. I was just going to say, I should have mentioned this when we were still